Chapter 2096. Tian was speechless when he saw Huadong's crazy reaction. He didn't know what to say. "I'm fine." After a while, Huadong finally calmed down. He waved his hand at the Black Kuan and Black Shark brothers without saying anything else. The two of them had no idea why Huadong was so excited. Huadong really wanted to personally see what the legendary dragon spring vein looked like. However, there were other people around him, so he could only suppress his desire for now. "Tian, since you've obtained it, let's leave the demon abyss now." Huadong nodded and prepared to leave with Tian. "Lord High Priest, are you planning to leave the demon abyss with Tian just like that?" Mushi looked at Huadong in confusion. She was extremely worried. "Is there a problem?" Huadong asked with a frown. "High Priest, Tian is the person who activated the 9 stone steel." Black Kuan reminded Huadong with a dark expression. Oh, Huadong nodded. However, he still didn't understand. He said, "So what? Can't we just inform the sacred arbiter of the 9 clans?" Mushi and the others looked at Huadong speechlessly. They didn't know if he really didn't understand, or if he was just pretending. And yet, Tian activating the 9 stone steel was a huge matter to the 9 ancient clans. The people of the 9 tribes were eager to know who the person that triggered the Julie steel was. However, what would their reaction be if they saw that the person who activated the 9 stone steel was a human? It would not be an exaggeration to say that the people from the 9 ancient clans would definitely go crazy. The person they had waited for hundreds of thousands of years was actually the human they hated the most. How could they accept that? High Priest, the 9 stone steel is the sacred stone of the 9 ancient clans. It is known as the stone of fate of the 9 ancient clans. Anyone in the demon abyss can activate the 9 stone steel, but not Tian. That's because he is not a member of the 9 ancient clans. Instead, he is the human they hate the most, Black Kuan explained to Huadong patiently. Huadong frowned and finally reacted. Although he was the Black Speckle Monstrous clan's high priest, he did not know much about the ancient era's 9 clans. He knew that the Julie stone tablet was important, but he didn't expect it to be this important. Just because Tian is a human, he can't activate the 9 stone tablet? Huadong frowned as he asked in shock. Yes. Mu Shi and the other 2 nodded in unison and said, "The 9 clans will not accept a human activating the 9 stone steel. They won't accept it." Huadong frowned even deeper. "If they don't accept it, what will they do?" Mushi's little face froze. Her deep blue eyes flickered as she said, "I think the people of the 9 clans will definitely kill Tian." "Kill Tian?" Huadong was stunned. He shouted, "Isn't the 9 stone tablet your stone of fate? If Tian activates the 9 stone tablet, he will become a person that will affect the fate of the 9 clans. Aren't you digging your own graves by killing Tian?" Mu Shi, the Black Kuan, and He Sha were stunned. They lowered their heads and said nothing. They did not know what to say. Huadong was unable to understand the prejudice the people of the 9 clans had against humans. As a human, Tian had already violated the 9 clans' taboo by entering the demon abyss. Now, he had even activated the 9 stone tablet. To the ancient era's 9 clans, this was simply a humiliation. How could the people of the 9 clans allow him to continue living? At that moment, Tian spoke. "Lord High Priest, there's no need to say anything else. Let's leave this place first." "Tian, you?" Huadong was stunned. He raised his head to look at Tian and said, "Right now, the entire area outside the demon abyss is filled with people from the ancient era's 9 clans. I'm afraid that even their patriarchs are here. If you leave now, aren't you walking right into a trap?" Activating the 9 stone tablet was truly not my wish. However, since I've already done it, I must face the consequences no matter what. Tian smiled bitterly and said, "The people of the 9 clans are waiting outside. If they don't see the person who activated the 9 stone tablet appear, they will not leave." This, Huadong's expression froze. He didn't know what to say. Tian was right. If he didn't leave, the people of the 9 clans would not let him go. Furthermore, even if he continued to stay in the demon abyss, it was not a solution. He couldn't possibly hide in the abyss forever. Right now, There was only one path in front of him, and that was to face it bravely. Actually, the person Yetion was most worried about right now wasn't himself, but Sakura. After Fat Cat entered the Nine Extremities, there was no news of him. This made Yetion even more worried. He was anxious to leave because he wanted to confirm Sakura's situation. Yetion, since you decided to leave, I'll accompany you. Huadong looked at Yetion and nodded his head. Don't worry. As long as I'm here, you won't die. Huadong had high hopes for Yetion. He knew that the latter was not only someone who could affect the fate of the 9 clans, but also someone who could change the fate of a dragon clan. Since Yetion obtained the Dragon Spring Vein, it meant that he had a special mission. Before Yetion completed his mission, Huadong wouldn't let him die. Mr. Yetion, you are the only human that I, Heisha, admire. I will definitely convince my father to let the black-scaled goblin tribe stand on your side, Heisha said solemnly. Kuin nodded his head. He would also support Yetion. Mushi's beautiful eyes flickered as she said with a resolute expression, Yetion, the Wood Elves will also support you. Thank you, everyone. Yetion nodded his head slightly. His expression was not one of fear, but one of determination. Excluding the ancient underworld tribe, there were still 8 ancient tribes. Even if the black-scaled goblin tribe and the wood spirit tribe supported Yetion, what about the remaining 6 tribes? They would never support Yetion. Following that, the few of them didn't waste any time and started heading to the upper levels of the Demon Abyss. At the same time, above the Demon Abyss, the surroundings of the Demon Abyss were filled with people. They stretched for several tens of thousands of meters. They were all people from the ancient 9 races. That day, practically everyone from the ancient 9 races had come to the Demon Abyss. They were patiently waiting for the person who activated the 9ly steel to appear. The activation of the 9ly steel was a huge matter that concerned the fate of the ancient 9 races. Everyone was paying close attention to it. At that moment, the sacred arbiter of the ancient 9 races was standing in the sky. 8 figures stood beside him. All of them had powerful auras. They were majestic and boundless like mountains and oceans. These 8 figures were none other than the patriarchs of the 5 great fairy tribes and 3 great monstrous tribes. They were also the emperors of the 5 great fairy empires and 3 great monstrous empires. The activation of the 9ly steel was a huge matter. Naturally, the 8 patriarchs had to appear. At that moment, their gazes were all fixed on the surface of the Demon Abyss. They were waiting for the figure that everyone was anticipating to appear. Chapter 2097. Countless pairs of eyes stared at the surface of the 10,000 degrees Demon Abyss with burning excitement. Look, someone's coming out. At that moment, someone suddenly shouted, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone looked over and saw a figure leaping out of the water and standing in midair. It's him. It really is him. The members of the 9 ancient clans exclaimed excitedly when they saw the face of the figure. Their eyes were burning with excitement. The person who appeared in front of them was none other than the number 1 monster of the 9 ancient clans, Mizuhara Kaori. Actually, before Mizuhara Kaori appeared, most people were certain that the person who triggered the 9ly steel was Mizuhara Kaori. As the number 1 monster of the 9 ancient clans, Mizuhara Kaori's reputation was too great. More importantly, he was the personal disciple of a holy elite. If nothing unexpected happened, he would become the next holy elite. The members of the 9 ancient clans had accepted Mizuhara Kaori's identity and status a long time ago. Thus, when they saw that the person on the surface of the 10,000 degrees Demon Abyss was him, they naturally accepted it. Mizuhara Kaori. It really is Mizuhara Kaori. I've already said that among the 9 ancient clans, only one person has the ability to trigger the 9ly steel, and that's Mizuhara Kaori. Mizuhara Kaori is indeed the number 1 monster of the 9 ancient clans. He really triggered the 9ly steel. In my opinion, Mizuhara Kaori should be the number 1 monster of the 9 ancient clans. He triggered the 9ly steel, which is much more impressive than the Netherworld Emperor. The crowd discussed loudly as they looked at Mizuhara Kaori with undisguised respect, reverence, and worship. It was as if they wanted to prostrate themselves on the ground and worship. When Mizuhara Kaori heard the crowd's discussion, there was no joy on his face. Instead, it became more and more gloomy. He really hoped that he was the one who triggered the ninely steel, but the truth was that it wasn't him. At that moment, he really had the urge to announce to everyone that he was the one who triggered the ninely steel. However, he still had some rationality left in him, so he didn't say that. He knew that Saint Duelist had special methods to determine who had activated the ninely stone steel. If he killed Niet Tian and the others, no one would question him. Of course, he wouldn't need to be tested, and he would be able to get away with it. But the problem now was that Niet Tian and the others were not dead, so he did not dare to pretend to have triggered the Julie Steel. This was because this lie was too big. Once it was exposed, Mizuhara Kaori wouldn't be the only one to be punished. Even the Water Fairy clan would be implicated. Mizuhara Kaori still had some conscience and did not dare to joke around with the fate of her people. But the current situation made him very embarrassed. Almost everyone believed that he was the one who had activated the Julie Stone Steel. This made him feel extremely ironic. Furthermore, if he were to tell the truth and tell everyone that the person who activated the ninely stone steel was a human, how would the people of the 9 clans react? Mizuhara Kaori. Mizuhara Kaori. Mizuhara Kaori. At this moment, the sky above the demon abyss was filled with thunderous cheers. Everyone treated Suhara Kaori as their hero, and the entire 9 clans were in a state of ecstasy. Mizuhara Kaori looked at the ecstatic people around him and felt like crying. At this moment, Mizuhara Kaori suddenly had another idea. He thought to himself, if I say that I'm the one who triggered the Julie Stone Steel, everyone will believe me. When Niet Tian comes out, even if he tells everyone that he's the one who triggered the Julie Stone Steel, how many people will believe him? With my current identity, as long as I tell everyone that Niet Tian killed Bloodscar and Yoli, will he still be alive? As long as Niet Tian is dead, the person who triggered the Julie Stone Steel will definitely be me. Thinking of this, Mizuhara Kaori's eyes trembled. He made up his mind and said, let's do it. It had to be said that Mizuhara Kaori was really ruthless this time. In order to become the hero of the 9 clans, he was actually going to pretend to have triggered the Julie Stone Steel. Having made up his mind, Mizuhara Kaori no longer hesitated. His figure moved, and he appeared beside the holy duelists. Everyone's eyes followed his figure, and the cheers at the scene gradually weakened. Mizuhara Kaori. Behind the holy duelists, a figure walked out excitedly. He was Mizuhara Kaori's father, the patriarch of the Water Fairy clan, Shui Jing. At this moment, Shui Jing was certain that Mizuhara Kaori was the one who triggered the Julie Stone Steel. How could he not be excited when his own son triggered the Julie Stone Steel? Although the patriarchs of the other clans all had smiles on their faces, it was obvious that they were smiling very reluctantly. Mizuhara Kaori triggering the Julie Stone Steel was a good thing for the 9 ancient clans. However, it was not necessarily a good thing for the patriarchs. In the future, the 9 ancient clans would definitely have to listen to Mizuhara Kaori's orders. The patriarchs of the other clans would also lose control of their own clansmen. How could they be happy when they thought of this? Father. Mizuhara Kaori bowed slightly to Shui Jing. Then, he looked at the holy duelist and respectfully called out, Teacher. The holy duelist responded and did not say anything else. Mizuhara Kaori frowned slightly. He knew that becoming a holy duelist was the most difficult stage. As long as the Saint Duelist believed that he was the one who had activated the ninely stone steel, then he was the one. Otherwise, things would become dangerous. Teacher, I was the one who triggered the Julie Steel. Mizuhara Kaori took a deep breath and pretended to be relaxed. Her eyes were burning with passion. The holy duelist's expression changed slightly, and a strange glint flickered in his eyes. He stared straight at Mizuhara Kaori and said in a deep voice, Kaori, I'll ask you again. Think carefully before you speak. Was it you who activated the Julie Steel? The patriarchs of the 8 clans were startled by the words of the holy duelist, and all of them wore expressions of shock and astonishment. The holy duelist's reaction clearly indicated that he was suspicious of Mizuhara Kaori. Could it be that the holy duelist thought that Mizuhara Kaori was lying? Teacher, Mizuhara Kaori's face stiffened, and a hint of panic flashed through her eyes. However, it only lasted for a second before she nodded and said, "It's me. I'm the one who triggered the Julie stone tablet." In an instant, Mizuhara Kaori's mind spun very quickly. However, in the end, he still decided to tell this lie to the end. Since he had already said it, there was no way to take it back. The holy duelist frowned, and his expression instantly turned gloomy. He had hoped that the person who triggered the Julie stone tablet was Mizuhara Kaori, but the truth was that this person was not Mizuhara Kaori. Before Mizuhara Kaori's appearance, the holy duelist still had a trace of hope in his heart. However, after the person appeared, the last trace of hope in his heart was shattered. Although he had yet to test Mizuhara Kaori, the holy duelist had already determined that the person who triggered the Julie stone tablet was definitely not Mizuhara Kaori. Chapter 2098. The divine duelist knew that Mizuhara Kaori was lying, so he asked him again and reminded him to think carefully before replying. But to his disappointment, the answer he received was still wrong. Lying about activating the ninely steel was a huge crime. Even if the divine duelist wanted to save Mizuhara Kaori, he wouldn't be able to do so. The 8 patriarchs were stunned when they saw the divine duelist's expression. They looked at Mizuhara Kaori in fear. These patriarchs had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, so they could naturally tell that something was amiss. The divine duelist's reaction was undoubtedly hinting that Mizuhara Kaori was lying about activating the ninely steel. But if the person who activated the ninely steel wasn't Mizuhara Kaori, then who was it? Mizuhara Kaori was the #1 monstrous genius of the 9 ancient clans. Could there be someone more talented than him in the 9 clans? The divine duelist and the 8 patriarchs didn't say anything. The atmosphere became extremely stifling. The crowd looked at the divine duelist and the others from afar, and also felt that something was amiss. They were all stunned and didn't know what was going on. Bang! At that moment, the sound of something breaking through the surface of the myriad degrees demon abyss suddenly rang out. The entire place was deathly silent. The sound of something breaking through the water was extremely loud, like a slap to the face. As someone else is coming out, the crowd was startled. They immediately shifted their gazes over and saw several figures appearing on the surface of the water. They couldn't help but exclaim in unison. The people who had just come out of the myriad degrees demon abyss were none other than Yetian and the others. The crowd's eyes flickered with disbelief. Someone recognized Mu Shi and exclaimed, "Look, isn't that the 9th princess of the Wood Elves? There's also the crown prince of the Black Scale tribe and the 3rd prince of the Black Scale tribe." Among Yetian and the others, Huadong's status as the high priest of the Black Scale tribe was undoubtedly the highest. However, very few people from the 9 clans had seen Huadong's true appearance. The first people that the crowd recognized were Mu Shi and the Black Kuan brothers. As high priest, He Xinshui, the patriarch of the Black Scale tribe, couldn't help but exclaim when he saw Huadong. He had never imagined that Huadong would appear at this time. Could it be? The next moment, He Xinshui suddenly thought of something. His eyes trembled, and his face showed an ecstatic expression. His first thought was that the Black Kuan or Black Shark might have triggered the Julie Steel. Both He Kuan and He Sha were his sons. If one of them was able to activate the Julie Steel, it would undoubtedly be great news for the Black Mysterious Water and the entire Black-Scaled monstrous tribe. Mu Shi. At this moment, the chief of the Wood Fairy clan, Mu Xiangshan, noticed Mu Shi as well. His pupils constricted, and a wisp of wild joy appeared on his face. Very clearly, he also thought of a possibility. Mu Shi activated the ninely steel. However, the ecstasy on his face only lasted for a moment because he saw another person, Nietian. Mu Xiangshan was still relatively calm. He knew that even though Mu Shi's talent was very high, it was still far from enough to activate the Julie Steel. On the other hand, Nietian might be able to activate the Julie Steel. Could it really be him? Mu Xiangshan suddenly thought of the countless nature-defying things that Nie Tian possessed in his body. Coupled with the mysterious fiend god embryo, the possibility of this was getting higher and higher. It was very likely that Nie Tian had activated the Julie Steel. Oh my god, it really is him. Mu Xiangshan was more and more certain that the person who had activated the Julie Steel was undoubtedly Nie Tian. His entire body froze, and he was instantly petrified on the spot. Mu Xiangshan, are you stupid? However, at this moment, a man with red hair and red eyes appeared behind Mu Xiangshan. It was the chief of the Fire Fairy clan, Yin Sheng. Yin Sheng looked at Mu Xiangshan with a look of disdain and said coldly, "Isn't it just your daughter appearing? Why are you so agitated? Do you think that it was your daughter who activated the Julie Steel?" Mu Xiangshan came to his senses and glanced at Yin Sheng, but did not speak. At this moment, his heart could be said to be filled with mixed feelings, and it was extremely complicated. If it was Mu Shi who had activated the Julie Steel, then it would be a happy ending. However, the problem now was that the person who had activated the Julie Steel was Nie Tian. How could it be him? How could it be him? Mu Xiangshan shouted in his heart, and his old face was twisted together. Nie Tian had activated the Julie Steel, and this was a violation of the most sacred thing of the 9 ancient clans. Mu Xiangshan really did not know what would happen next. At this moment, on the surface of the water, Nie Tian looked at the black mass of people around him, and he could not help but frown. He smiled bitterly in his heart. It seems that the people of the 9 ancient clans are almost all here. They are really concerned about the Julie Steel. Nie Tian, what should we do? Huadong saw this scene, and his face also darkened as he asked in a low voice. Ignore the others for now. Let's go find the Holy Duelist. Nie Tian thought for a moment, then fixed his gaze on the Holy Duelist and prepared to go. However, just at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared. He pointed at Nie Tian and shouted, "Damn brat, it's actually you. You truly have some nerve to show yourself." Nie Tian was startled. When he looked at that person, his expression changed, and he shouted in his heart, "Why did this guy appear?" Truly, when it rains, it pours. The person who suddenly appeared was none other than the blood fiend, monstrous clan's Xuexing. Not far from him stood another figure. It was the dark monstrous clans in Yumeng. Those two people were not unfamiliar to Nie Tian. They were precisely the two of them who had joined hands to kill the Fire Elf clans, Yin Wuzuan. Furthermore, they were planning to shift the blame for Yin Wuzuan's death onto Nie Tian and Mu Shi. Nie Tian did not expect those two to appear at such a time. "Xuexing, get out of my way. I have no time to waste with you." Nie Tian became cold, then spoke in a deep voice. "Damn brat, you are impudent." Xuexing roared. "You are an inferior human who entered the myriad degrees demon abyss. Furthermore, you joined hands with the Wood Elf clan's 9th princess to kill the Fire Elf clan's Yin Wuzuan. Now, you actually want me to get out of your way? You clearly have a guilty conscience." Human. When the people of the 9 ancient clans heard Xuexing suddenly say the name human, their gazes immediately trembled. Their expressions changed, and they glared at Nie Tian with righteous indignation. The name human was a taboo in the 9-lead demon region. It was not allowed to be mentioned. The 9-lead demon region was even more so a place where humans were not allowed to set foot. But now, not only had Nie Tian come to the 9-lead demon region, he had even entered the myriad degrees demon abyss. This was clearly a blasphemy against the 9 ancient clans. At that moment, the crowd only heard Xuexing say that Nie Tian was a human and did not pay attention to the rest of his words. Chapter 2099. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he saw the crowd's reaction. He thought to himself, I didn't expect the 9 ancient clans to hate humans so much. The 9 ancient clans were very calm just a moment ago. However, when they heard that Nie Tian was a human, their expressions immediately changed. Their gazes were like they wanted to skin Nie Tian alive. Nie Tian didn't expect the 9 ancient clans to hate humans so much. He couldn't help but worry about what would happen next. Everyone listen up. At that moment, Xuexing suddenly raised his voice and said, This person was brought here by the ancient Ming, and he's not from the ancient Ming at all. He's an inferior human. Not only did this human come to the Jiuli demon domain, but he also entered the myriad degrees demon abyss. What's even more hateful is that he joined hands with the 9th princess of the Wood Elves and cruelly killed the 9th prince of the Fire Elves, Yin Wuzuan. This inferior human despised the 9 ancient clans and killed their clansmen. Tell me, does he not deserve to die? This time, the crowd finally heard Xue Xing's words clearly. Their faces stiffened and they all wore expressions of disbelief. They never imagined that Nie Tian would actually kill Yin Wuzuan. Yin Wuzuan had a very high status in the Fire Elves. He was the #1 monster of the Fire Elves and was being groomed to be the next Fire Elves king. But now, he had actually died in the hands of Nie Tian. He had died in the hands of an inferior human. How could the 9 ancient clans accept this? In the next moment, the 9 ancient clans reacted and immediately exploded. Despicable human. He set foot in the Jiuli demon domain and blasphemed the myriad degrees demon abyss. His crimes are unforgivable. This shameless human actually dared to kill a member of our 9 ancient Ming clan. He deserves to die. Bastard. He killed our 9th prince. Our Fire Elves will not live under the same sky as him. The furious roars of the 9 ancient Ming clans revealed their overwhelming anger. In the end, the 9 ancient Ming clans actually shouted in unison, "Kill him! Kill him! Kill him!" Waves of angry roars resounded above the 10,000 degrees demon abyss like landslides and tsunamis, shaking the entire 10,000 degrees demon abyss. The people from the 9 clans were furious because a human had entered the myriad degrees demon abyss and killed people from the 9 clans. This was something they could not allow. Nie Tian's figure stood in midair as he looked at the angry crowd around him. He could not help but frown. Huidong and the others became nervous, fearing that the members of the 9 clans would lose control of their emotions and charge at them. "Bastard! You killed my son, I want your lives." Suddenly, a furious roar came from high up in the sky. Then, a flaming figure appeared, and a boundless sea of fire shot out from his body. It transformed into flames that covered the sky and pressed down on Nie Tian and the others. Lord Yin Sheng. The sudden scene caused the crowd to be stunned. They opened their eyes wide and saw that the person who had suddenly attacked was none other than the chief of the Fire Elf tribe, Yin Sheng. When Yin Sheng heard that Nie Tian and Mu she had joined forces to kill Yin Wuzuan, he could not remain calm and rushed over. Yin Wuzuan was his most beloved son and the most monstrous genius of the Fire Elf tribe. But now he had been killed. This was something that Yin Sheng could not accept. As the chief of the Fire Elf tribe, Yin Sheng's strength was already at the peak of the paramount god level. His battle prowess was comparable to the top experts of the 9 realms. When he attacked, the entire sky and earth shook, and the space within tens of thousands of meters became a furnace. What a strong aura! Nie Tian was tens of thousands of meters away. Sensing Yin Sheng's aura, his expression changed, and he exclaimed in his heart. Yin Sheng was really strong. He was definitely not weaker than Nie Dao and the others. Given Nie Tian's current strength, he could not possibly be a match for Yin Sheng. Nie Tian, the rest of you back off. At this critical moment, Huidong's voice rang out. With a stomp of his feet, his figure shot forward like an arrow that had been released from a bow. Huidong's aura surged and blossomed in the air, forming a huge barrier that blocked Yin Sheng's attack. Seeing this, Nie Tian and the others retreated to a safe place. Fortunately, the high priest is here. Otherwise, we would have been in danger. Nie Tian steadied himself and looked at Yin Sheng, who was high up in the sky. It was indeed very dangerous just now. If not for Huidong, Nie Tian and the others would have died on the spot. Damn it! Yin Sheng's killing move was blocked. He was furious. His red eyes flickered with violent flames. He stared at Huidong and shouted, "Who are you? Why did you save this human?" Huidong was a low-key person. Few people had seen his face. Even Yin Sheng, the chief of the Fire Elf tribe, did not know him. The high priest of the Black Scale Demon tribe, Huidong. Huidong steadied himself and said loudly, He is the high priest of the black scale demon tribe. When the loud voice rang out, everyone was stunned. All of them had expressions of disbelief on their faces. They could not believe their eyes at all. Everyone in the 9 tribes knew that the status of the high priest was even higher than the chief of the black scale demon tribe. However, who would have thought that the high priest was not a member of the black scale demon tribe? So you are the high priest. Yin Sheng was very calm. He said in a deep voice, Please step aside. Don't stop me from avenging my son. Otherwise, even if you have a special status, I will not be afraid. Step aside. Step aside. Step aside. As soon as Yin Sheng's voice fell, everyone from the Fire Elf tribe stood up and stood behind Yin Sheng, shouting loudly, If I don't step aside, what can you do? Huadong's face was gloomy and cold. If you don't step aside, then you will die with him. Yin Sheng's eyes trembled and the flames around him grew stronger. His whole body was like a burning flame. Yin Sheng, do you dare to touch my high priest? Before Huadong could react, a voice as majestic as the ocean resounded in the sky. Shortly after, a figure descended. It was the patriarch of the Black-Scale Monstrous Clan, He Xianshui. As the chief of the Black-Scale Demon Tribe, how could He Xianshui watch others kill the high priest of the Black-Scale Demon Tribe and do nothing? He Xianshui, what are you doing? Are you going to start a war with the Fire Elf tribe? Yin Sheng was stunned. He roared, and a violent sea of fire appeared behind him. Yin Sheng, you dare to touch my high priest? Do you think the Black-Scale Demon Tribe is afraid of the Fire Elf tribe? He Xianshui roared coldly and loudly. Black-Scale Demon Tribe, listen to my order. If the Fire Elf tribe dares to take half a step forward, kill them. Yes, the Black-Scale Demon Tribe replied in unison. Their voices were like thunder that shook the 9 heavens. In an instant, the Black-Scale Demon Tribe and the Fire Elf tribe, the 2 ancient clans, were ready to fight at any time. The sudden scene caused everyone's expression to change, and the atmosphere instantly became tense. Who would have thought that the Black-Scale Demon Tribe was going to fight with the Fire Elf tribe? Nie Tian frowned. He didn't think that things would turn out like this. Chapter 2100. The Black-Scale Demon Clan confronted the Fire Elf clan. The atmosphere suddenly became tense and depressing. The people of the Fire Elf clan were all shocked and didn't dare to take a step forward. The Fire Elf clan was a relatively strong clan among the 5 major elf clans, second only to the Water Elf clan. However, compared to the Black-Scale Demon clan, it was still a bit weaker. He Xianshui. Yin Sheng's eyes darkened and his face became gloomy, but he didn't dare to move, because he knew that if he made a move now, it would inevitably lead to a bloody battle between the 2 clans. In the end, the unlucky one would be the Fire Elf clan. Yin Sheng, I don't care if you want to avenge your son, but if you dare to touch the high priest of my clan, you will be the enemy of the Black-Scale Demon clan. The Black-Scale Demon clan is not afraid of you. He Xianshui was also a bit afraid. He just wanted to scare Yin Sheng. If the 2 clans really started a war, even if the Black-Scale Demon clan was stronger than the Fire Elf clan, they would also pay a heavy price. Huadong's figure flashed to arrive by He Xianshui's side and said in a loud voice, Patriarch, that human is someone I'll protect with my life on the line. If anyone dares to touch him, then they'll have to step over my Huadong's corpse. Huadong's words shocked everyone. They were stunned for a moment and then looked at Nie Tian in horror. As the Black-Scale High Priest, Huadong wanted to protect Nie Tian with his life. This was undoubtedly forcing the Black-Scale Demon clan to live and die together with Nie Tian. He Xianshui frowned and was obviously a little unhappy. He knew that Huadong had helped the Black-Scale Demon clan, but Huadong's action was undoubtedly forcing the Black-Scale Demon clan to the opposite side of the other ancient clans. Because to protect Nie Tian was to go against the other clans. Whoever dares to touch Mr. Nie Tian, ask me, He Sha first. Just when He Xianshui was confused, another voice sounded. It was his son, He Sha. He Xianshui couldn't help but be stunned. When he was about to speak, he was interrupted by another voice. As long as I, He Kuan, am still breathing, I won't allow anyone to hurt Mr. Nie Tian. He Kuin's figure appeared beside He Xianshui and said loudly. He Xianshui looked at He Kuin and He Sha with a puzzled gaze. These were his two most beloved sons. He couldn't help but feel strange in his heart. He Sha was rash and said some things casually. However, Black Kuin has always been a steady child. Why would he risk his life to protect that human? Could it be that there's something special about that human? Or did he do something earth-shattering? Filled with doubts, He Xuanshui's eyes flickered. After thinking for a while, he stepped forward and said loudly, "Since that human is the person that the High Priest wants to protect, he is naturally the person that my black-scale monstrous clan wants to protect. Whoever dares to touch him must first go through my black-scale monstrous clan." As He Xuanshui's voice fell, everyone at the scene was stunned. They were completely dumbfounded. Even the people of the black-scale monstrous clan had looks of disbelief on their faces. No one would have thought that He Xianshui would actually make such a decision and support Nie Tian without any hesitation. As the clan leader of the black-scale monstrous clan, He Xuanshui's words undoubtedly carried the most weight. Once his words spread, the entire black-scale monstrous clan must protect Nie Tian. At this moment, Nie Tian was also stunned. He Xuanshui's action was indeed beyond his expectations. And Mushi, will not agree to anyone who dares to touch Nie Tian. Just when everyone was stunned, a clear voice sounded. It was the ninth princess of the Wood Elves, Mushi. Very good. Just when Mushi's voice had yet to fade, another voice sounded from the sky. Immediately, Mu Xiangshan's figure descended, and he said loudly, "People of the Wood Elves, listen up. Anyone who dares to harm Nie Tian is the enemy of the Wood Elves." Once again, everyone was stunned. Their trembling eyes revealed how shocked they were at this moment. First, it was the Black-Scale Monsters clan, then it was the Wood Elves. The attitudes of the two great clans had greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. This was really too strange. Yes, at this moment, the people of the Wood Elves reacted. Although many of them didn't know what was going on and were even very unwilling, they still stood up. At this moment, in the sky, the other clan leaders and the sacred duelists were all stunned and couldn't react for a long time. After a full 10 seconds, the sacred duelist's eyes trembled. An imperceptible glint actually flashed in his eyes as he thought to himself, "Who exactly is this human brat? He just arrived in the Julie demon domain not long ago." Yet without saying a word, he made the clan leaders of the two great clans risk the fate of their entire clans to protect him. At this moment, the other clan leaders' expressions were uglier than if they had eaten feces. Not even in their wildest dreams would they have thought that the Black-Scale Monstrous clan and the Wood Elves would actually oppose them for a human. "Mu Xiangshan, your daughter colluded with humans and killed my son. You actually dare to stand up to protect this human. I will kill you first." At this moment, a violent roar sounded. Yin Sheng actually acted as if he had gone mad. After a wild roar, he directly attacked Mu Xiangshan. Boom! The boundless sea of fire instantly moved and turned into countless flame arrows that pressed towards Mu Xiangshan. Mu Xiangshan's expression changed. His reaction was very fast. Countless green vine armor surged out of his body and condensed into a huge vine armor shield around him. Rumble! In the next moment, the flame arrows fell. The vine armor shield around Mu Xiangshan's body immediately ignited, and his entire body turned into a huge fireball. "Father!" The sudden scene caused Mu Xi to cry out in shock. Her small face became deathly pale. Mu Xiangshan was enveloped in flames and immediately fell into danger. His strength was originally very strong, but unfortunately his opponent was Yin Sheng, the fire elves who were the nemesis of the Wood Elves. Yin Sheng and Mu Xiangshan were originally warriors of the same level. However, because of the perfect restraint of their attributes, the former could instantly kill the latter. This was not a suppression of strength, but a suppression of attributes. If Yin Sheng's opponent was the leader of the Water Elves, Shui Jing, he would also be restrained by the latter in one move. Mu Xiangshan, go and die. Yin Sheng had an absolute upper hand in one move. Instantly, his expression became ruthless. Once again, he struck out with his palm and directly attacked Mu Xiangshan. Yin Sheng clearly used all his strength in this palm strike. He wanted to directly kill Mu Xiangshan. Stop! At this critical moment, a deep and powerful voice resounded high up in the sky. Soon after, a ball of white light appeared with a loud rumble. It enveloped Mu Xiangshan and blocked the fatal blow for him. Then it dispersed the flames around his body in an instant. Mu Xiangshan was still in shock. He raised his head and looked at the person who had saved him. After he regained his senses, he hurriedly bowed and respectfully thanked. "Thank you, Lord Saint Duelist." The person who had saved him was none other than the Saint Duelist of the 9 clans. Lord Saint Duelist. Yin Sheng was suddenly stunned. When he saw the face of the person in front of him clearly, his expression instantly stiffened and he shouted in shock. Chapter 2101. Everyone was stunned by the Holy Swordsman's sudden attack. Soon after, the scene became silent. Countless gazes locked onto the Holy Swordsman as if they were waiting for something. The Holy Swordsman had an extraordinary status among the 9 ancient clans. They were existences above the patriarchs of the 9 clans. The Holy Swordsman had the final say in any matter of the 9 ancient clans. However, ever since the Great War between the 9 ancient clans and the humans hundreds of thousands of years ago, the 9 ancient clans suffered heavy casualties and had to lay dormant in the Julie demon domain for hundreds of thousands of years. In these hundreds of thousands of years, the Holy Swordsman's status had declined, but it did not affect his authoritative status. Therefore, when the Holy Swordsman attacked, everyone became cautious. Nie Tian looked at the Holy Swordsman with a shocked expression. Although the Holy Swordsman had only attacked casually, judging from his aura, his strength far surpassed Yin Sheng, Mu Xiangshan, and the others. It was as if there was a mysterious power floating around the Holy Swordsman, giving him an inviolable dignity. Yin Sheng, Mu Xiangshan, and the others were already peak supreme gods, but the Holy Swordsman's strength was far above theirs. Just how strong was the Holy Swordsman? Nie Tian. Just as Nie Tian was feeling bewildered, Fat Cat's trembling voice rang out. "I really didn't expect this old man to have the strength of a half-step saint." Hearing these 2 words, Nie Tian's eyes trembled. His expression froze, and he was speechless for a long time. Half-step saint. No wonder the Holy Swordsman's strength was far above Yin Sheng and the others. It turned out that he was a legendary half-step saint. Half-step saint was an extremely terrifying realm. It referred to those who already had 1 foot in the saint realm. Fat Cat had said that in the near future, Hui Jioshin would become a half-step saint. In the past, Nie Tian had no idea what a half-step saint was. Now that he saw the Holy Swordsman attack, he finally understood how terrifying a half-step saint was. After all, a half-sage could easily kill a peak paramount god. Nie Tian had never imagined that he would encounter a legendary half-step saint here. It was too terrifying. "Are you two done messing around?" The saint decision-maker's face was gloomy. His gaze swept across Yin Sheng and Mu Xiangshan. He reprimanded them coldly. "You 2 clan leaders are fighting in front of so many people. What a scandal. The face of the ancient era's 9 clans has been utterly lost by the 2 of you." Mu Xiangshan knows his mistake. Mu Xiangshan hurriedly lowered his head and admitted his mistake. "What about you?" The Saint Finisher's eyes darkened as he looked at Yin Sheng. Yin Sheng knows his mistake. Yin Sheng lowered his head. Even though he was unwilling, he did not dare to show it. The dignity of a Saint Duel Master could not be challenged. "It's good that you know your mistakes." The Sacred Duelist nodded slightly. His gaze swept across everyone before finally locking on Nie Tian. He said in a clear voice, "You're the main character of this incident. Shouldn't you stand up and say something?" Nie Tian was slightly taken aback. His figure immediately moved and arrived beside the Sacred Duelist and the others. When Yin Sheng saw Nie Tian, he hurriedly stepped forward and said emotionally, "Lord Sacred Duelist, This human brat colluded with the 9th princess of the Wood Elves and caused the death of my son. Please uphold justice for my fire elf race. Yin Sheng, this sacred duelist, knows how to do things. I don't need you to teach me. The sacred duelist glared at Yin Sheng coldly and said, if your son is really dead, no matter who the murderer is, this sacred duelist will not allow him to live. Thank you, Lord Sacred Duelist. Yin Sheng bowed and expressed his gratitude. His gaze toward Nie Tian was extremely vicious. Nie Tian looked at the sacred duelist, and his gaze turned serious. He thought to himself, fortunately, I didn't kill Yin Wuzuan back then. Otherwise, it would be troublesome. However, I don't know if this sacred duelist has the ability to find out the truth. At this moment, the sacred duelist looked at Nie Tian and asked, You're Nie Tian, right? Yes. Nie Tian nodded and didn't say anything else. Very good. The sacred duelist nodded slightly. His sharp eyes stared at Nie Tian and said, Nie Tian, this sacred duelist has a question for you. The 9th prince of the fire elf race, Yin Wuzuan, was it you who joined hands with the 9th princess of the Wood Elves, Mushi, to kill him? Lord Sacred Duelist, if I say no, would you believe me? Nie Tian asked calmly. The sacred duelist's gaze was like water, without the slightest ripple, as he calmly said, You don't need to probe this sacred duelist's attitude. You just need to tell me yes or no. As for what is the truth, this sacred duelist will judge for himself. No, Nie Tian answered directly and told the sacred duelist what had happened. In the end, he pointed at Xing and said, Yin Wuzuan was indeed injured by me, but the one who killed him was him. You're slandering me. When Xing saw Nie Tian pointing at him, he immediately shouted and said, I have no enmity with Yin Wuzuan. Why would I kill him? Why? Nie Tian asked. His expression changed, and he said, To frame me, and to instigate a war between the Wood Elves and the Fire Elves. In the entire matter, Princess Mu, she never fought with Yin Wuzuan. You only dragged her into it to cause a war between the Fire Elf race and the Fire Elf race. You're talking nonsense. You're spouting bullshit. Xing panicked. He took out a shadow stone and activated it in front of everyone. The image stone displayed the scene of Nie Tian killing Flame Wuzuan with a single sword strike. When everyone saw the scene in the shadow stone, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. They looked at Nie Tian in shock and disbelief. Just now, Nie Tian had personally said that he defeated Yin Wuzuan, but no one believed him. After all, Yin Wuzuan was a late paramount god, while Nie Tian was only a late over god. How could Nie Tian defeat him? But the scene in the shadow stone was absolutely true. It proved that Nie Tian wasn't lying. Pointing at the shadow stone, Xing said excitedly and fearfully, See, this is the proof that this human kid killed Yin Wuzuan. He killed Yin Wuzuan with a single sword strike. He was excited because the shadow stone was his greatest trump card, but he was fearful because others would doubt it. As expected, everyone looked at Xing with a strange look in their eyes. There were so many people present, and not a single one of them was a fool. They could all tell that everything Nie Tian said was closer to the truth. Furthermore, the shadow stone in Xing's hands was full of loopholes. The shadow stone only recorded the scene of Nie Tian defeating Yin Wuzuan with a single sword strike. It didn't record how Yin Wuzuan died. If Xing really wanted to record it, why would he leave out such a crucial scene? And the most suspicious thing was why Xing would use the shadow stone to record everything. Wasn't that clearly showing that he had ulterior motives? It would have been better if Xing hadn't taken out the shadow stone, but now that he did, it made him even more suspicious. Why are you all looking at me like that? Could it be that you'd rather believe a human than me? Being stared at by everyone, Xing's face turned pale and his voice trembled. Chapter 2102. Xing framed Nie Tian and Mu Shi with a shadow stone, but it was full of loopholes. What a joke. How intelligent was the holy duelist? Seeing Xing's reaction, he already knew what was going on. Xing, this holy duelist will give you another chance. Tell me, what is the truth? The holy duelist took a step forward and stared at Xing with a gloomy expression. Xuexing panicked when he felt the boundless oppressive might wrapping around him. His knees went soft, and he fell to the ground like a pile of mud. His eyes were trembling, and he couldn't even speak. Xuexing's reaction was self-explanatory. Everyone realized that what Nie Tian said was the truth. "Little bastard, so it was you who killed my son? Bastard, this clan chief will kill you." No matter how stupid Yinsheng was, he still realized what was going on. With a roar, he was really going to kill Xuexing. "Stop." The holy duelist roared and stopped Yinsheng. Then he shouted, "Xuexing killed Yin Wuzuan and framed others. His crimes are unforgivable. This holy duelist hereby announces that he shall take his own life." Take his own life. Everyone was stunned when they heard those two words. They looked at the holy duelist in shock and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. "Take my own life." Xuexing reacted and shouted. Then he shouted at the top of his lungs, "I won't take my own life. I don't want to die. I don't want to die." Then he raised his head and saw the patriarch of the blood-fiend monstrous clan, Xue Jufeng. He crawled over and begged, "Father, Father, I don't want to die. Help me plead with Lord Holy Duelist not to kill me." Xuexing's status was not low either. He was the prince of the blood-fiend monstrous clan, and the patriarch, Xue Jufeng, was his father. Xue Jufeng frowned. How could he bear to see his own son commit suicide? After thinking for a while, he knelt in front of the Saint Executor and said, "My son is young and ignorant. He has committed a mistake. Please show mercy and spare his life." Xue Jufeng's brows furrowed. Young and ignorant? The Saint Duelist sneered and looked at Xue Jufeng with gloomy eyes. He said in a deep voice, "Xue Jufeng, your son is young and ignorant, but are you also young and ignorant? Blood Sentence made such a mistake and almost caused a war between the Fire and Wood Elves. I'm already being merciful by only killing him. You actually want to save his life? Then tell me, if Xuexing is still alive, how will the Fire and Wood Spirit clans view me? As Saint Executor? Xue Jufeng, are you forcing me, as Saint Duelist, to do something wrong with you? I wouldn't dare." Xue Jufeng could feel the boundless pressure from the sacred swordsman. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as he quickly lowered his head, not daring to look at the sacred swordsman. "That's good." The Saint Brat coldly snorted. He then looked at Xuexing and coldly said, "Brat Xue, are you still not going to act? Could it be that you want this saint to act personally?" Xuexing's expression stiffened, and despair filled his eyes. "Unfilial son, kill yourself." At this time, Xue Jufeng stood up. From his posture, if Xuexing didn't kill himself, he would kill someone. Wait. However, just as Xue Jufeng's voice faded, a voice rang out. It was Nie Tian. What else did he want? Everyone else was stunned, staring at Nie Tian in surprise. They didn't know what he wanted to do. "Lord Saint Executor, Xuexing didn't kill Yin Wuzuan and frame me and Princess Muxi alone. He had a helper by his side." Nie Tian smiled faintly, then turned his gaze to Dark Dream, who was not far away. Dark Dream's pupils shrank, and her expression instantly changed, becoming as pale as a sheet. She had originally thought that she had already escaped, but she didn't expect that Nie Tian would still remember her. The Saint Executor frowned and glanced at Nie Tian, seemingly very dissatisfied with Nie Tian. In truth, with his intelligence, how could he not have thought that Xuexing had a helper by his side? The people of the Bloody Fiend Monstrous clan were not adept at concealment. If it was only Xuexing, it would have been impossible for him to secretly record the scene of Nie Tian killing Flying Flame Wuzuan with a Shadow Stone. Thus, there must have been someone secretly helping Xuexing. Dark Dream had appeared together with Xuexing earlier, so it was very clear who his helper was. The Saint Executor knew this, but didn't say it out loud. He actually had other thoughts. He didn't want Nie Tian to offend even more people. If only Xuexing died, Nie Tian would offend the Bloody Fiend Monstrous clan. However, Dark Dream would also die, so the people Nie Tian offended were the people of the Bloody Fiend Monstrous clan and the Dark Monstrous clan. This was very disadvantageous to his future situation. However, Nietion had already mentioned Dark Dream, so there was nothing he could do. Dark Dream, you and Xuexing should commit suicide together, the Saint Executor sighed and said solemnly. The Dark Monsters clan's patriarch and Lien watched from aside. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. He didn't dare to plead for leniency, because he didn't want to end up like Xue Jufeng. Xuexing and Dark Dream had expressions of despair and helplessness on their faces. Countless gazes were fixed on them, but no one dared to speak. In the end, the two of them committed suicide. It could be considered a dignified death. Thus, Yin Wuzuan's death came to an end. Next, it was time to deal with Nietion. As a human, Nietion had entered the myriad degrees demon abyss. This was a great taboo of the 9 clans. Other than the Black Scale Monsters clan and the Wood Elves, all of the 9 clans wanted to kill him. Even the Fire Elves wanted to kill Nietion, even though Nietion had pointed out the true murderer of Yin Wuzuan. Nietion, all of the 9 clans want to kill you now. Do you have anything to say? The Saint Executor shifted his gaze to Nietion. His expression was very strange, as if he was expecting something. Just because I'm a human, the 9 clans want to kill me, right? Nietion smiled bitterly, his reaction very calm. Yes. The Saint Executor nodded heavily. Humans have always been a taboo of the 9 clans. The myriad degrees demon abyss is the core of the Geely demonic realm. By entering the myriad degrees demon abyss, you have violated the taboo of the 9 clans and provoked them. It is only natural that the 9 clans want to kill you. What a great only natural. Nietion smiled faintly, then said, but now the Black-Scaled Monsters clan and the Wood Elves want to protect me. Are the 9 clans going to kill each other just to kill me? HM? The Saint Executor frowned, his expression instantly darkening. He hadn't expected Nietion to ask such a question. The current situation was indeed difficult to deal with. The Black-Scaled Monsters clan and the Wood Elves swore to protect Nietion, while the other clans wanted to kill Nietion. If they couldn't find a solution, would the 9 clans really want to kill each other? The Saint Executor had never imagined that the 9 clans would one day kill each other for a human. Nietion, you are a smart person. I believe that you also don't wish to see the clans kill each other. The Saint Executor calmed down and said, now, please tell me, is there any reason why we shouldn't kill you? Chapter 2103. I'm the one who triggered the Geely Stone Steel. Nietion spoke calmly. His voice was not loud, but was like thunder exploding in everyone's ears. Everyone's expression instantly froze. They stood rooted to the spot, dumbfounded, and looked at Nietion with disbelief in their eyes. The person who triggered the Geely Stone Steel was a human. Could there be any more shocking news than this? The 9 tribes had waited for hundreds of thousands of years for someone who could trigger the Geely Stone Steel to appear. But now, the person they had been waiting for was the human that they hated the most. This news was too shocking, too sensational, and too ironic. Nietion smiled bitterly and shook his head when he saw the crowd's reaction. He had not expected the 9 tribes to have such a huge reaction. Impossible, he's lying. The deadly silence lasted for a few moments before an elder of the 9th clan pointed at Nietion and exclaimed, "What the hell are you talking about?" Yes, he must be lying. Then, the others began to shout. At that moment, everyone realized a serious problem. If the person who triggered the Geely Stone Steel was Nietion, then what about Mizuhara Kaori? Mizuhara Kaori had admitted before Nietion that he was the one who triggered the Geely Stone Steel. But now, Nietion had announced that he was the one who triggered the Geely Stone Steel. Now, things were getting heated. One was the top genius of the 9 tribes, while the other was a lowly human in the eyes of the 9 tribes. Their identities and statuses were worlds apart. The 9 tribes were willing to believe that Mizuhara Kaori was the one who triggered the Geely Stone Steel. Mizuhara Kaori is the one who triggered the Geely Stone Steel. This human is lying. The crowd shouted as if they had gone mad. He's lying. Kill him. Kill him. Kill him. Everyone shouted in unison, and the sound of mountains collapsing and the earth cracking resounded throughout the world. The 10,000 degrees demon abyss was shaking along with them. Nietion stood rooted to the ground, stunned. It took him a long time to react. He did not know that Mizuhara Kaori had already admitted to triggering the Julie Stone Steel. Mizuhara Kaori's actions were beyond Nietion's expectations. Back in the 10,000 Degrees Demon Abyss, Mizuhara Kaori had wanted to kill Nietion and take the credit for activating the 9 Stone Steel. If he had really killed Nietion, he would have taken the responsibility for triggering the 9 Stone Steel. But now that Nietion was still alive, he actually dared to admit it shamelessly. Mizuhara Kaori's skin was really thick. Mizuhara Kaori was standing not far from Nietion with a proud smile on her face. He didn't expect the 9 clans to support him so much. Actually, the 9 clans didn't support Mizuhara Kaori. They just didn't want to acknowledge Nietion. Mizuhara Kaori felt that even if the Holy Swordsman had the means to detect if he was lying, it would not be good to go against the wishes of the 9 clans. Therefore, at this moment, he was bursting with confidence again. Silence! At this moment, the Holy Swordsman suddenly roared. Like a thunderclap, his aura surged into the sky and resounded beyond the 9 heavens. The scene instantly fell into a deathly silence. Everyone looked at the Holy Swordsman with trembling eyes, not knowing what the latter was going to do. Nietion also became nervous at this moment. The Holy Swordsman's next words would determine his life and death. Mizuhara Kaori, come here. The Holy Swordsman stunned everyone, then looked at Mizuhara Kaori and said in a deep voice. Mizuhara Kaori noticed the Holy Swordsman's unusual expression. Her smiling face instantly stiffened, and she gulped as she walked over step by step. Nietion, come here too. The Holy Swordsman looked at Nietion and gestured for him to come over. Nietion Kaori's expression was calm. True gold fears no fire, so there was nothing for him to be nervous about. Mizuhara Kaori and Nietion stood less than 10 meters away from each other, staring at each other coldly. However, their expressions were very different. One was arrogant, but it was difficult to conceal his panic, while the other was calm, but he was very calm. Mushi, Heikuin, Heisha, and the others all looked at Nietion and Mizuhara Kaori with playful expressions. They were waiting for Mizuhara Kaori's lie to be exposed. Teacher, what are you going to do? Mizuhara Kaori saw the Holy Swordsman walking over and could not help but feel nervous. She knew that the Holy Swordsman had a special method that could detect if someone had activated the 9 Stone Steel. The Holy Swordsman ignored Mizuhara Kaori and said, Nietion, Mizuhara Kaori, both of you said that you activated the 9 Stone Steel on your own. This Holy Swordsman have a Sacred Heart Stone. Both of you just need to inject some energy into the Sacred Heart Stone, and this Holy Swordsman will know who activated the 9 Stone Steel. As he said that, a pure white round stone that was as clear as jade appeared in the Holy Swordsman's hand. He said, both of you, let's begin. Teacher, do you really want to be tested? At this time, Mizuhara Kaori looked at the Sacred Heart Stone in the Holy Swordsman's hand and could not help but panic. She said with a trembling voice, Teacher, do you really believe that an inferior human can activate the 9 Stone Steel? Mizuhara Kaori, it's not up to me to say who activated the 9 Stone Steel. Even if I believe you, so what? The Holy Swordsman smiled coldly and pointed at the people around him. Even if they believe you, so what? It's true that I'm your teacher, but I'm also a Holy Swordsman. My identity as a Holy Swordsman requires me to do this. As long as one person from the 9 clans suspects this Holy Swordsman will have to test the truth. You're my disciple, and you even said that you activated the 9 Stone Steel. What are you afraid of? As your teacher, do you think that this Holy Swordsman will harm you? The Holy Swordsman's words were sharp and sonorous, causing Mizuhara Kaori's face to turn red. When the people from the 9 clans heard the Holy Swordsman's words and saw Mizuhara Kaori's expression, they could not help but mutter. If the 9 Stone Steel was really activated by Mizuhara Kaori, why was he so nervous? Could it be that the 9 Stone Steel was really activated by this human? With that thought in mind, everyone's expression changed. Lord, Holy Swordsmen are fair and just. This junior admires you, Nyetian said with a faint smile. This junior is willing to cooperate with Lord Holy Swordsman. With that, Nyetian took a step forward, and a surge of energy surged from his fingertip into the Sacred Heart Stone. When everyone saw this, their eyes trembled. Their nerves were stretched to the extreme, and their hearts were in their throats. However, the strange thing was that after Nyetian's energy entered the Sacred Heart Stone, it was like a rock sinking into the ocean. There was no reaction at all. Even after dozens of seconds, there was still no reaction from the Sacred Heart Stone. It's not him. It's not him. He's not the one who activated the 9 least stone steel. The crowd suddenly reacted and began to shout crazily. Nyetian was also puzzled. He could not help but raise his head to look at the Holy Swordsman and thought to himself, "This old man, he can't be messing with me, right?" Silence. At this moment, the Holy Swordsman growled, and the scene immediately became deathly silent. "Mizuhara Kaori, you do it." The Holy Swordsman looked at Mizuhara Kaori and said in a cold tone, "Teacher, this kid has already tried, and the Sacred Heart Stone has no reaction. This means that the person who activated the 9 least stone steel wasn't him. So there's no need for this disciple to try again," Mizuhara Kaori said as she felt guilty. The Holy Swordsman's eyes immediately darkened, and his expression turned cold. This scared Mizuhara Kaori so much that her face turned pale, and she quickly channeled some energy into the Sacred Heart Stone. Chapter 2104. The Sacred Heart Stone glowed brightly, and the crimson light surged in the air. It was a colorful sight to behold. The sudden scene stunned Mizuhara Kaori. She quickly reacted and shouted, "The Sacred Heart Stone is reacting. The Sacred Heart Stone is reacting. It's me. I'm the one who triggered the Julie steel." He could not believe what he was seeing. He almost jumped up and down in a frenzy. The Sacred Heart Stone is glowing. It's really Mizuhara Kaori who triggered the Julie steel. The crowd also reacted at this time and began to shout in ecstasy. Just now, they were still suspecting that Mizuhara Kaori was lying and that it was really Nyetian who triggered the Julie steel. However, the result of the test was very clear. Nyetian did not make the Sacred Heart Stone react, but Mizuhara Kaori made the Sacred Heart Stone release the crimson light. Nyetian was also stunned and could not react for a long time. He even suspected that the Sacred Heart Stone's reaction was too slow. He was the one who triggered the red light, but it came out too slowly, and Mizuhara Kaori just happened to be lucky. Nyetian even thought of testing it again. However, given the current situation, the 9 tribes would definitely not give him a chance to test it again. "You old fart, you're really messing with me." Nyetian looked at the Holy Cultivator and roared in his heart. He was very sure that he was the one who triggered the Julie steel. Now that the Sacred Heartstone's test was wrong, it must be the Holy Cultivator's doing. Mizuhara Kaori was the Holy Cultivator's disciple, so it was normal for him to be biased. "Old fart, to think I praised you for being fair just now." Nyetian cursed in his heart as he stared at the Holy Cultivator. However, he realized that the Holy Cultivator's face was extremely solemn and did not seem happy. He's obviously playing tricks, but now he's acting like he's going to die. What a cunning old fox. Nyetian did not believe that the Holy Cultivator was really sad and continued to curse in his heart. At this time, the other tribe leaders, Huadong, Mushi, Heikuan, and Heisha were all stunned. Especially Huadong and a few others who knew the truth. They were completely dumbfounded. They had never imagined that the Sacred Heart test of Saint Duelist would have such a result. Was the lofty, dignified Holy Duelist really up to something? Although Mu Xiangshan and the others did not see Nyetian activate the Julie Stone tablet with their own eyes, they could tell from Nyetian and Mizuhara Kaori's reactions that Mizuhara Kaori was lying. However, the current outcome had exceeded their expectations, and they were unable to accept it. Could it be that the Saint Duelist wants to kill Nyetian? Mu Xiangshan thought to himself, he is a Saint Duelist. Doesn't he know that killing a person who activated the Julie Stone tablet is the same as destroying the future of his entire clan? Just as many people were ecstatic and puzzled, The voice of the sacred duelist rang out. Mizuhara Kaori, when are you going to stop lying? The sacred duelist roared and stared at Mizuhara Kaori with a pair of fiery eyes. He wanted nothing more than to kill the latter. After the violent roar, the scene fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at the sacred duelist, completely clueless as to what was going on. Didn't Mizuhara Kaori cause the sacred heartstone to react? Why did the sacred duelist say that he was lying? Teacher, I didn't lie. My power triggered a red glow on the sacred heartstone. Doesn't this mean that I'm the one who activated the Julie Stone tablet? Mizuhara Kaori was stunned. As she spoke, her expression changed, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Because at that moment, she thought of another possibility. The person who did not cause the sacred heartstone to react was the one who activated the Julie Stone tablet. Yet Tion's gaze trembled. At the same time, he thought of this possibility. His expression suddenly changed, and he was stunned on the spot. Bullsh asterisk T. The sacred duelist was unable to restrain his anger. He actually cursed and roared. The sacred heartstone is not testing whether a person activated the Julie Stone tablet. What the sacred heartstone tests is whether a person is lying. If you're not lying, the sacred heartstone won't have a reaction. The fact that you triggered the sacred heartstone's red glow just now means that you're lying. You bastard. Do you know how big of a crime it is to lie about activating the Julie Stone tablet? Can you bear the consequences? At that moment, the sacred duelist was like an enraged beast. His entire body exuded a terrifying aura of rage, and even his body was trembling. Everyone was stunned by this sudden scene. They looked at the sacred duelist and Mizuhara Kaori dumbfoundedly, their eyes trembling. As the saying went, the deeper the love, the more severe the responsibility. This was the sacred duelist's current mood. Toward this disciple of his, Mizuhara Kaori, he had poured almost all of his heart and soul into teaching and guiding her. He looked forward to the day when his time came and Mizuhara Kaori could replace him as the new sacred duelist of the 9 clans. However, when Mizuhara Kaori lied about activating the Julie Stone tablet, the sacred duelist's heart turned cold. He did not think that Mizuhara Kaori would have the guts to lie about this matter. He indeed hoped that Mizuhara Kaori would be able to activate the Julie Stone tablet, but if the latter failed to do so, he would only be disappointed. Now, however, the sacred duelist was truly in despair. Mizuhara Kaori had committed a huge crime. Even if he wanted to protect him, it was impossible. Even if he was a sacred duelist, he could not openly protect his own disciple. Before using the sacred heartstone, the sacred duelist had already begun to suspect Mizuhara Kaori. However, before the results were out, he still had a sliver of hope in his heart. Now that the results were right in front of him, Mizuhara Kaori was unable to explain himself. Teacher, I was wrong. I was wrong. I was really wrong. Mizuhara Kaori was scared silly by the sacred duelist's actions. His knees buckled, and he immediately knelt down and kowtowed with all his might. He pleaded, Teacher, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please forgive me this time, teacher. Everyone's gazes froze once more, and they were instantly petrified. The fact that Mizuhara Kaori had admitted his mistake proved everything. He was really lying. The crowd's expressions became sluggish, and it took a long time for them to react. Their gazes fell on Tion, and their eyes were filled with shock and horror. If Mizuhara Kaori was not the one who activated the Julie Stone tablet, then the person who did so could only be Tion. A human had activated the Julie Stone tablet. The hearts of the 9 tribes members thundered. Many of them were instantly filled with despair, as if they had lost all hope. The 9 tribes hated humans the most, but now, the person who activated the Julie Stone tablet was a human. How could they accept this? Regardless of whether you accept it or not, the person who activated the Julie Stone tablet is indeed me, Tion muttered with a bitter smile after he saw everyone's reaction. Chapter 2105. As soon as the holy duelist finished his sentence, the entire place fell into a dead silence. No one had expected the holy duelist to suggest killing Mizuhara Kaori. Master, don't kill me, don't kill me. Mizuhara Kaori was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He prostrated himself at the feet of the holy duelist and begged, "Mizuhara Kaori, sit down. You still have the face to beg for mercy after committing such a mistake." The holy duelist roared. His aura surged and forced Mizuhara Kaori several meters back. When the patriarchs saw that the holy duelist was truly enraged, they panicked and looked at the holy duelist in shock. Yet Tion smiled faintly and thought to himself, this holy duelist is really cunning. He clearly doesn't want to kill Mizuhara Kaori, but he's still pretending to be angry. The holy duelist's actions might be able to deceive others, but it definitely could not deceive Tion. Tion could tell at a glance that the holy duelist did not want to kill Mizuhara Kaori. On the contrary, he wanted to protect him. The holy duelist was pretending to be angry, but it was actually to give Mizuhara Kaori a way out. If he really wanted to kill Mizuhara Kaori, he could have just killed him with a single slap. There was no need to go through so much trouble. Mizuhara Kaori's father, Shui Jing, was the first to kneel down and plead, "Lord Holy Duelist, Mizuhara Kaori is still young and has no sense of propriety. Please forgive him this time on account of the fact that he has followed you for so long. Shui Jing, Mizuhara Kaori has committed such a mistake. As his master, of course I want to forgive him. However, I'm also a holy duelist, so I must be fair." The holy duelist frowned and glanced at the patriarchs. "Now, this holy duelist will hand over the decision to you 8 patriarchs. If you think that Mizuhara Kaori can live, then let him live. If you think that he must die, then let him die." Shui Jing was stunned. He did not expect the holy duelist to say such a thing. However, he immediately understood that this was the holy duelist's way of protecting Mizuhara Kaori. With the holy duelist's status and strength, he could easily decide Mizuhara Kaori's life. However, he had handed over this authority to the 8 patriarchs and even declared beforehand that he wanted to spare Mizuhara Kaori. By doing this, he was clearly trying to protect Shuichi Haruka. Shui Jing stood up and bowed deeply towards the other 7 patriarchs. With a solemn expression, he said, "Patriarchs, I, Shui Jing, beg everyone on behalf of my son. Please consider that he is young, ignorant, and talented. Please give him a way out." The other 7 patriarchs frowned, their expressions changing. Mizuhara Kaori was known as the #1 demon of the 9 clans. She was indeed a person with terrifying talent. It was precisely because of this that the clan leaders were extremely fearful. Although the ancient era's various races appeared to be unified on the surface, there were surging undercurrents internally. The competition between the various races was extremely intense. Allowing Mizuhara Kaori to continue living was not a good thing for the other races. Seeing that the 7 patriarchs were hesitating, the holy duelist coughed dryly and said, "Although Mizuhara Kaori did something wrong, his original intention was good. He also wanted to do something for the 9 tribes, but he used a wrong method." Sigh. After letting out a long sigh, the holy swordmaster's old face became even more solemn. The 7 patriarchs were stunned, and their expressions changed. These patriarchs were all old monsters who had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Naturally, they could understand what the holy swordmaster was trying to say. If they still wanted to kill Mizuhara Kaori now, it would be equivalent to not giving the holy swordmaster any face. "Lord Holy Swordmaster, I feel that although Mizuhara Kaori was wrong, he did not cause any serious consequences. Moreover, his talent is outstanding, and he will definitely grow into a peerless powerhouse in the future. This is a good thing for our 9 tribes. Therefore, I believe that Mizuhara Kaori can live." A person stepped forward and said in a clear voice. It was the patriarch of the Wood Spirit clan, Mu Xiangshan. "Thank you, Brother Mu." Shui Jing hurriedly went forward to express his gratitude and said, "I will remember Brother Mu's kindness. If there is anything you need me for in the future, as long as Brother Mu says the word, I will do my best." The other patriarchs were stunned when they saw Shui Jing's actions. Mu Xiangshan was the first to relent so Shui Jing naturally had to show his sincerity. However, making such a promise in front of a sacred duel master was a little too much for Shui Jing to bear. Shui Jing was a smart person. By giving Mu Xiangshan such a good guarantee, he was clearly trying to provoke the other patriarchs into making their stand. I also think that Mizuhara Kaori can live. Little Fatty, the patriarch of the Earth Spirit clan, shook his fat body and stepped forward to express his stance. Thank you, Brother Earth. Shui Jing hurriedly bowed to express his gratitude. With Mu Xiangshan and Little Fatty as precedents, the other patriarchs also stepped forward to express their support for Mizuhara Kaori. In this situation, the Holy Sword Master was unwilling to kill Mizuhara Kaori, so why would the other patriarchs object? They might as well do him a favor at little cost. After all the patriarchs expressed their stance, Nie Tian smiled faintly and stepped forward. Lord Holy Sword Master, fellow patriarchs. HM? The Holy Sword Master narrowed his eyes. Sensing that Nie Tian's expression was strange, he asked in a cold tone, Nie Tian, what else do you want to say? Lord Holy Sword Master, I merely wish to say one thing. I feel that if this matter is not said, it might affect the unity of the 9 clans in the future. Nie Tian nodded slightly and spoke in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. What is it? The Holy Sword Master asked with a frown. Nie Tian nodded. He said, I merely wish to tell everyone that Mizuhara Kaori killed the Dark Monstrous clans in Yoli and the Blood Fiend Monstrous clans Shuehen in the Myriad Degrees Demon Abyss. What? The Dark Monstrous clan's clan chief and the Blood Fiend Monstrous clan's clan chief were both startled. Then they cried out in alarm. And Yoli and Shuehen were not only known as the 3 great evildoers, they were also the princes of their clans. The Dark Monstrous clan's clan chief and the Blood Fiend Monstrous clan's clan chief were in Yoli and Shuehen's fathers. How could the 2 of them not be emotional when their sons were killed? Nie Tian's words also stunned the other clan chiefs, and their expressions changed in an instant. While Mizuhara Kaori's act of falsely activating the 9-Li steel was not a small offense, it did not result in any serious consequences. However, the fact that she had killed in Yoli and Shuehen was a different matter. The identities of the 2 of them were not simple at all. The Dark Monstrous clan and the Blood Fiend Monstrous clan would definitely not allow them to die in vain. For Nie Tian to mention this matter at such a time, he was simply trying to send Mizuhara Kaori to her death. However, this was not his true intention. His true intention was merely to tell the truth. Mizuhara Kaori was not a good person. However, Yoli and Shuehen were even less so. The reason why Nie Tian mentioned the matter of Mizuhara Kaori killing Yoli and Shuehen was because he was worried that the 9 clans would break off relations with each other because of this matter and might even go to war. Paper could not contain fire. Even if he did not mention it now, the matter would still be discovered in the future. At that time, it would truly be fatal. If Mizuhara Kaori were to truly die because of this matter, then Nie Tian could not be blamed. It could only be said that the evil he brought upon himself was the hardest to bear. Nie Tian, Mizuhara Kaori suddenly reacted and stood up. She wished that she could skin Nie Tian alive. Chapter 2106. Mizuhara Kaori was shocked by the Holy Swordsman's roar. She knelt down again, her entire body turning into a pile of mud. You bastard! Why did you kill Yoli and Shuehen? The Holy Swordsman roared furiously, as if he had gone mad. He had risked his old face to save Mizuhara Kaori's life in the Julie Stone Steel. How could he have imagined that Mizuhara Kaori would kill 2 people of such status? Now, even a Holy Swordsman could not save Mizuhara Kaori, because just now, Xue Xing and Yu Ming had committed suicide in front of everyone for killing Yen Wuzuan. Now that Mizuhara Kaori had killed Yoli and Shuehen, if he could still live, where would the dignity of a Holy Swordsman go? Even though he was a Holy Swordsman, he could not shield his own disciple so blatantly. The Holy Swordsman seemed to have gone mad, and he actually aged a lot in an instant. Not only did he treat Mizuhara Kaori as a disciple, he also treated him like a father and son. In fact, he doted on Mizuhara Kaori even more than his father, Shueijing. Perhaps it was because of this that Mizuhara Kaori had such an arrogant and ruthless personality. The holy swordsman was a sensible person. He did not blame Yetian because he knew that it would be better for him to say it now. Now that he said it, only Mizuhara Kaori had died. If the Dark Goblin clan and the Blood Fiend Monsters clan found out about it, it would be a war between the three clans. Teacher, Mizuhara Kaori was so scared that his face turned pale and he could not speak. Shueishing and Yu Ming had just committed suicide in front of him. That scene was still vivid in his mind. And now, it was his turn to commit suicide. Mizuhara Kaori, now that things have come to this, I can't protect you anymore. Do it yourself. The holy swordsman let out a long sigh, his old body trembling. Mizuhara Kaori's eyes were filled with despair, and his entire body was completely stiff. When Yetian saw this, he did not expect Mizuhara Kaori to have such an important place in the holy swordsman's heart. Wait. After thinking for a while, Yetian suddenly took a step forward and gestured to Mizuhara not to rush into action. You bastard, I'm about to die. Are you still not going to let me go? Mizuhara Kaori suddenly raised her head and stared at Yetian with bloodshot eyes as she roared. Yetian furrowed his brows and ignored him. Instead, he turned his gaze to the Holy Duelist and said, Lord Holy Duelist, I feel that Mizuhara Kaori's matter can be put aside for now. Let's deal with my matter first. The Holy Duelist was stunned for a moment. He had originally wanted to deal with Mizuhara Kaori first before discussing the matter with Yetian. He had not expected that Yetian would step forward on his own. Yes, kill this human first. Yetian's voice wasn't loud, but the people around him heard it clearly. They immediately echoed and shouted. This time, they completely agreed with Yetian's suggestion. They wanted to see Yetian killed first. The holy duelist's eyes narrowed slightly. He could sense an almost overbearing confidence from Yetian's expression. He did not even dare to believe that a late overgod could actually remain so calm before him. He activated the Julie Steel. He's even more powerful than the Onyx Emperor back then. Looks like his talent is definitely above the Onyx Emperor's. The holy duelist looked at Yetian and thought to himself, I need to find a way to protect him. Most of the people of the 9 races did not know what the person who activated the Julie Steel meant to the 9 races. But the holy duelist knew very well how important Yetian was to the 9 races. Yetian was destined to affect the fate of the 9 races. If he died, it would be the same as ending the future of the 9 races. It was because of this that the holy duelist had to protect Yetian. However, the people of the 9 races were in high spirits right now. Protecting Yetian would not be easy. Even the holy duelist could not go against the wishes of the 9 races and act willfully. All right, since you brought it up, I'll deal with your matter first. The holy duelist calmed down and glanced at Yetian. Then he looked around at the crowd and said loudly, This human is without a doubt the person who activated the Julie Steel. You all know that the Julie Steel is the sacred stone of the 9 races, the Stone of Destiny. The person who activates the Julie Steel is the person who can change the fate of the 9 races. Although he's a human, he has indeed activated the Julie Steel. So no matter what, he is the person chosen by the Julie Steel. I know that you all have a great prejudice against humans, but I must remind you that his life and death is related to the fate of the 9 races. Now, it's up to you to decide how we should treat this human who activated the Julie Steel. As soon as the holy duelist finished speaking, the people of the 9 races immediately burst into an uproar. This human has activated the Julie Steel. Can he really change the fate of the 9 races? This guy shouldn't have appeared in the Julie demonic domain. Him activating the steel was a mistake. Humans have always been an inferior race. A human doesn't have the right to decide the fate of the 9 races. The crowd discussed loudly. In the end, most of them felt that Yetian did not have the right to decide the fate of the 9 races. Kill him! Kill him! Kill him! Once again, thunderous cheers resounded from the crowd. Most of them supported killing Yetian. The holy duelist frowned. He had already expected this result. Nie Tian's expression was also very solemn. He could tell that the holy duelist was protecting him and speaking up for him. However, this did not change the attitude of the 9 races. The members of the 9 clans hated humans too much. Silence. The holy duelist suddenly said. Everyone immediately calmed down. The holy duelist's eyes flickered and he said loudly, Nie Tian is a human, but he activated the Julie steel. This holy duelist can understand that you can't accept this. Since that's the case, let's follow the previous method. The 8 races will discuss and have the 8 patriarchs vote to decide Nie Tian's fate. All right, the holy duelist's suggestion was immediately agreed by everyone. They believed that their patriarchs would make the right choice. The holy duelist nodded and waved his hand to signal everyone to be quiet. He then swept his gaze across the 8 patriarchs and said in a deep voice, Patriarchs, the fate of Nie Tian will be decided by all of you. As the holy duelist of the 9 races, I have to remind you, the fate of the person who activated the Julie steel is linked to the 9 races. If he dies, the fate of the 9 races will be affected. As for what kind of impact it will have, I don't know. Your vote is very important. I hope that you won't be affected by your own emotions. You must be responsible for your own people. The 8 patriarchs nodded. They could naturally tell that the holy duelist wanted to protect Nie Tian. Next, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the voting for the patriarchs began. I vote to live. Mu Xiangshan was the first to stand up and express his opinion. Me too, to live. Following that, He Xianshui also stood up and voted for Nie Tian to live. The 2 of them were Nie Tian supporters to begin with, so their attitude was within his expectations. Immediately, Shui Jing stood up and said cold. At the same time, he glared fiercely at Nie Tian. I vote to die. Chapter 2107. Shui Jing's death vote was within Nie Tian's expectations and did not come as a surprise to him. There were only 5 clan chiefs left. Their votes were extremely important. The Fire Elves clan chief, Yin Sheng, took a step forward and spoke coldly. I vote death. Nie Tian frowned, but did not have much of a reaction. Following that, the Earth Elves clan chief and the Golden Elves clan chief spoke at the same time. I vote death. Of the 5 great elf clans, apart from the Wood Elves, the other 4 were all in an alliance. Shui Jing's attitude caused the other 3 elf clans' clan chiefs to vote for death. Of the 8 clan chiefs, 6 had already declared their votes. 2 voted for life, while 4 voted for death. Only the Dark Monstrous clan's clan chief and the Blood Fiend Monstrous clan's clan chief remained. If either of them voted for death, it would mean that Nie Tian would be executed. The holy duelist frowned and asked in a deep voice, Have the 2 of you decided? Yes, the 2 of them nodded. Then they took a step forward and said, I vote death. Their calm voices represented their resolute attitude. The Dark Monstrous clan and the Blood Fiend Monstrous clan had voted for Nie Tian's death. Hearing their voices, the holy duelist was startled and froze on the spot. Although it was not an unexpected result, he was still unable to accept it. Nie Tian frowned, and his expression changed. He already knew that the votes of the 8 clan chiefs would sentence him to death. But at that moment, he was still very shocked and did not know what to do next. He would naturally not allow himself to be captured without putting up a fight. However, with his current strength, anyone of the many experts present could easily kill him. Die, die. He deserves to die. After several seconds of deathly silence, the crowd reacted and immediately burst into frantic shouts. Evidently, this was the result that the majority of the crowd wanted to see. If anyone dares to touch Nie Tian, they will have to ask me first. Right at that moment, a voice was heard. Then, a figure appeared and blocked Nie Tian's path. It was Huadong. Huadong knew how important Nie Tian was, and he would never let him die here. How dare you? This is the consensus of the 8 clans. Even if you are the high priest of the Black Scales, you cannot defy it. When Shui Jing saw Huadong appear, he immediately roared angrily, and his whole body's aura rose. I don't care. No one is allowed to touch Nie Tian. Huadong roared in a deep voice. He looked like he was ready to risk his life. Courting death. Shui Jing laughed coldly. He took a step forward and threatened, High Priest Blackscales, I don't have much patience. If you don't back off, you will die with this human. Shui Jing, how dare you? Almost at the same time, He Xin Shui said loudly, whoever dares to touch the High Priest of the Black Scale Tribe will be the enemy of the Black Scale Tribe. He Xin Shui, are you going to go against the agreement of the 8 clans for this human? At this moment, Yin Sheng stood up and shouted. Immediately, the chiefs of the other tribes tensed up and prepared to make their moves. In the blink of an eye, the atmosphere at the scene became extremely tense. As long as someone made the first move, it would immediately ignite a great battle between the various powerhouses. Impudent! All of you stop. At the most critical moment, the holy duelist took a step forward. His aura was wild and forceful, forcing the other powerhouses to retreat. What a powerful aura! Seeing this scene, Tian was shocked. A half-step saint was really terrifying. Huadong and the other chiefs were all peak paramount gods, but they were actually forced back by the aura of the holy duelist. Lord Holy Duelist. The chiefs were forced back by the holy duelist. Their faces turned red, and they hurriedly bowed, not daring to be arrogant anymore. You're all chiefs of the tribes. How can you fight with your lives so easily? What a scandal! The holy duelist angrily rebuked, and his aura gradually retracted. Then, he turned his gaze to Huadong and asked, High Priest Blackscales, are you going to protect Tian? Yes. Huadong nodded heavily and said, even if I die, I must not let anything happen to Tian. The holy determiner's eyes narrowed slightly. He immediately looked at Black Profound Water and asked, Black Profound Water, if High Priest Blackscale risked his life to protect Tian, what would your Blackscale clan do? He Xin Shui raised his head to look at the holy swordsman and solemnly said, live and die together with the High Priest. Black Mysterious Water, are you crazy? You dare to go against the agreement of the 8 clans for a human? Shui Jing suddenly raised his head and looked at He Xin Shui with a gloomy expression as he roared. So what if I do? If you force me into a corner, Black Profound Water, can do anything. Black Profound Water did not care about Shui Jing's threat at all and shouted insolently. Hey Xin Shui, you're crazy. Shui Jing didn't expect He Xin Shui to be so determined that he actually dared to go against the agreement of the 8 clans. All right, all of you shut up. The others still wanted to say something, but they were interrupted by the Saint Duelist. Tian looked at the Saint Duelist and didn't know how the latter would deal with the situation in front of him. The current situation was that because of Huadong, the Black Scale Goblin race had to protect Tian even if it meant risking the entire race. However, the result of the agreement of the 8 clans was to kill Tian. Following this, if they were not careful, it would inevitably cause the 8 clans to kill each other. I have been in the position of Saint Duelist for hundreds of thousands of years. At this time, the Saint Duelist let out a long sigh and said, perhaps in your eyes, Saint Duelists are existences that are high above, respected and worshipped by others. However, only I know how heavy this position is. Sometimes, I am even suffocated by the 3 words Saint Duelist. Sir Saint Duelist, The few patriarchs felt that something was wrong with the tone and expression of the Saint Duelist and couldn't help but worry. The Saint Duelist bitterly smiled and waved his hand, saying, therefore, today, I have decided to let go of the heavy burden of the Saint Duelist. The patriarchs were stunned by the Saint Duelist's words. Their expressions were repressed, and they couldn't say anything for a long time. The Saint Duelist actually didn't want to be a Saint Duelist anymore. To the 9 clans, this was absolutely earth-shattering news. The surrounding crowd was also stunned as they looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. The Saint Duelist had an extraordinary meaning to the 9 clans. He was a very special existence. Now that the Saint Duelist suddenly announced that he would step down from the position, who would be qualified to become the next Saint Duelist? The Saint Duelist was the #1 expert of the 9 lead demon domain. His existence represented the highest authority of the 9 clans. In the eyes of the 9 clans, besides the current Saint Duelist, no one else was qualified to be a Saint Duelist. Sir Saint Duelist, your identity is of great importance to the 9 clans. You can't step down. The eyes of the 8 patriarchs flickered as they tried to dissuade the Saint Duelist. Say no more. I have already decided. The Saint Duelist waved his hand and interrupted the 8 patriarchs, saying, Moreover, I have already found the next Saint Duelist. The next Saint Duelist. Everyone was stunned. They looked at the Saint Duelist with burning eyes and cried out in shock. Who is it? Him. The Saint Duelist's eyes were like torches as he pointed at a silver-haired martial artist. Chapter 2108. The Sacred Elite had spoken his mind about the next Sacred Elite, and his finger was actually pointing at Nie Tian. Him. Everyone was completely stunned by the scene before them. They all cried out in surprise, and their expressions instantly turned sluggish. They simply could not believe their eyes. At that moment, the person the Sacred Elite was pointing at was actually Nie Tian. The next Sacred Elite that the Sacred Elite was talking about was actually Nie Tian. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, no one would have believed the scene before them. They even suspected that the Sacred Elite was pointing at the wrong person. The Sacred Elite was the most respected position in the 9 ancient clans, yet it was actually being held by a human. This was something that the 9 ancient clans could not accept. But now, the Sacred Elite was indeed pointing at Nie Tian, and his eyes were blazing. He was clearly looking forward to making Nie Tian the next Sacred Elite. If not for the special status of the Sacred Elite, the 9 ancient clans would have even suspected that the person before them was their enemy. Sir Sacred Elite, you mustn't. The Water Fairy Patriarch, Shui Jing, was the first to react. He knelt down in front of the Sacred Elite and said loudly, The Sacred Elite is the supreme existence of the 9 ancient clans. How can we let a human take the position? The Fire Fairy Patriarch, Yin Sheng, also knelt down and said earnestly, Sir Sacred Elite, this human has profaned the 9 Li Stone Tablet. He is truly an enemy of the 9 ancient clans. We absolutely cannot let him become the next Sacred Elite. The leader of the Earth Elves, Little Fatty, was like a ball. He knelt on one knee with great difficulty and said, Lord Holy Swordsman, with your current state, it won't be a problem for you to be a holy swordsman for another few 100,000 years. Please don't step down from your position. The other patriarchs also knelt down and pleaded with the Sacred Elite to retract his decision. At this time, even Mu Xiangshan and He Xianshui were a little flustered and did not know what to do. They could accept Nie Tian's survival, but for them to recognize Nie Tian as the next Sacred Elite was too sudden. The Sacred Elite was the most respected existence. Once they recognized him, it meant that they would have to lower their heads in front of Nie Tian from now on. Saint Duelist, please take back your decision. When the people of the 9 clans saw their patriarchs kneeling, they followed suit and begged in unison. This time, almost everyone objected to the Holy Duelist decision. Patriarchs and clansmen, regardless of whether you accept it or not, this is the final decision I, as a Holy Duelist, will make. The Saint Duelist swept his gaze over everyone and loudly declared, from now on, the human who triggered the 9 Li Steel, Nie Tian, is the new Saint Duelist of the ancient 9 clans. After saying that, the Saint Duelist suddenly took a step forward and did something that no one expected. He directly knelt before Nie Tian. Lord Saint Duelist, you mustn't. The sudden scene stunned everyone, and they immediately cried out in alarm. The sudden action of the Saint Duelist also gave Nie Tian a fright. He had never imagined that the Saint Duelist would actually pass the position of Saint Duelist to him, and that he would even kneel before him in front of so many people. Everyone from the 9 clans was kneeling before the Saint Duelist, but the Saint Duelist was kneeling before Nie Tian. This was equivalent to the people of the 9 clans kneeling before Nie Tian. Lord Saint Duelist, what are you? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. He didn't know what to say, so he took a step forward and tried to help the Saint Duelist up. However, the Saint Duelist knelt firmly and refused to get up. He loudly said, Ming Jianyu of the ancient Ming clan pays his respects to Lord Saint Duelist. Nie Tian was stunned. He froze on the spot, his entire body stiffening. This old fella actually did it for real. The people of the 9 clans were completely shocked when they saw this scene. Their expressions were blank, and they didn't react for a long time. It was only then that most of them learned that the Saint Duelist's real name was Ming Jianyu. Many people had even forgotten that the Saint Duelist, Ming Jianyu, was a member of the ancient Ming clan. The fact that the Saint Duelist was a member of the ancient Ming clan surprised Nie Tian. He really didn't know why Ming Jianyu had agreed to the ancient Ming clan being expelled from the Julie demon domain by the other 8 clans. However, these things weren't important anymore. The most important thing now was that the next Saint Duelist would soon be Nie Tian. In fact, the moment Ming Jianyu knelt before Nie Tian, it was already destined that Nie Tian would be the next Saint Duelist. The 9 clans had a tradition among the Saint Duelists. The next Saint Duelist would be appointed by the current Saint Duelist. This was an unchanging rule. Since Ming Jianyu had appointed Nie Tian as the Saint Duelist, then he would be the Saint Duelist. No one could change that. Nie Tian, this is the last way to save your life. For the future of the 9 clans, this is the only thing Ming Jianyu can do. Ming Jianyu thought to himself. His eyes were filled with extreme determination. As a Saint Duelist, he knew better than anyone else what Nie Tian meant to the 9 clans. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he, Ming Jianyu, could die, but Nie Tian couldn't. Since Nie Tian had activated the Julie Steel, his life was related to the future of the 9 clans. It was even related to the survival of the 9 clans. Because of this, Ming Jianyu was willing to save Nie Tian at all costs. As long as Nie Tian became a Saint Duelist, the 9 clans wouldn't be able to kill him no matter how much hatred they had for him. A Saint Duelist was a supreme existence. Not only could the 9 clans not kill Nie Tian, but they also had to treat him with utmost respect. Everyone was petrified when they heard Ming Jianyu's words. They knew that there was no turning back. No matter what they thought, Nie Tian was already a Saint Duelist. The human that the 9 clans hated the most and looked down on the most had actually become the supreme existence of the 9 clans. How ironic was this? Many members of the 9 clans even began to wail when they realized what was going on. The entire scene was filled with grief. Lord Saint Duelist, please rise. Nie Tian was stunned by this sudden change. He only reacted after a long time and gestured for Ming Jianyu to rise. Lord Saint Duelist, please call me Ming Jianyu in the future. Ming Jianyu stood up and said respectfully. Nie Tian smiled bitterly and thought to himself, "You old man, your joke is a little too much." He knew that Ming Jianyu was doing this to protect his life. However, the identity of a Saint Duelist was a little exaggerated. With his current status and strength, how could he convince the masses? Let alone experts like the 9 clans patriarchs. Even Mizuhara, Hei Kuan, and Hei Sha were not a match for Nie Tian. A late-stage over-god Saint Duelist was definitely the weakest Saint Duelist in the history of the 9 clans. At this moment, Ming Jianyu suddenly turned around and looked at the 8 patriarchs with a gloomy gaze. "Patriarchs, what are you all standing around for? Why haven't you come and greet the new Saint Duelist?" Clearly, he was using his might to force the 8 patriarchs to acknowledge Nie Tian's identity as a Saint Duelist. As long as the 8 patriarchs acknowledged Nie Tian's identity, the following matters would be simple. However, the 8 patriarchs were like blocks of wood, not moving at all. Even Mu Xiangshan and He Xianshui did not move. It was true that they supported Nie Tian, but they did not support Nie Tian becoming a Saint Duelist. Seeing this situation, Ming Jianyu frowned. Just as he was about to say something, he was stopped by Nie Tian. Ming Jianyu was stunned for a moment. When he saw Nie Tian walking over, he did not know what Nie Tian wanted to do. Nie Tian walked over step by step and eventually came to a stop beside Shui Jing, the High Chieftain of the Water Fairies. Chapter 2109. The attitudes of the 8 chiefs were unyielding. Even under Ming Jianyu's coercion, they did not agree. If even the 8 chiefs did not acknowledge Nie Tian's status as a holy duelist, then it was even more impossible for the people of the 8 clans to acknowledge him. Nie Tian came to Shui Jing's side and looked at him strangely. Shui Jing also looked at Nie Tian and frowned. He said coldly, "Brat, what do you want?" "Nothing." Nie Tian smiled faintly. He then transmitted his voice to Shui Jing. "Chief Shui, I want to make a deal with you." "A deal?" Shui Jing was stunned and almost shouted. His frown deepened as he transmitted coldly, "What deal?" "Your attitude in exchange for Shui Yuan Kaori's life." Nie Tian nodded and transmitted his voice, but he did not show it on the surface. Shui Jing's eyes narrowed, and his expression changed the next moment as he understood. Nie Tian wanted him to acknowledge his status as a holy duelist. In exchange, Nie Tian would use his status as a holy duelist to save Shui Yuan Kaori's life. After understanding Nie Tian's intentions, Shui Jing's expression changed, and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. He did not expect that Nie Tian would dare to make a deal with him directly. From the look of it, Nie Tian seemed very confident and calm. Shui Jing stared at Nie Tian with a burning gaze. He was considering whether this deal could be made. Using his compromise in exchange for Shui Yuan Kaori's life was indeed a good deal. However, Shui Jing could not be sure if Nie Tian had the ability to protect Shui Yuan Kaori. If he acknowledged Nie Tian's status as a holy duelist, but the latter did not protect Shui Yuan Kaori, then it would be troublesome. "Chief Shui, I know what you are worried about." The corner of Nie Tian's lips curled up as he transmitted his voice to Shui Jing. "I can guarantee you that I will definitely protect Shui Yuan Kaori. However, I must become a holy duelist first. Moreover, as you can see, Lord Ming Jinyu has long since decided that I am the best candidate to become a saint duelist. To put it bluntly, even if you 8 patriarchs don't acknowledge me, with Lord Ming Jinyu's support, my position is still very stable. At least none of you can kill me. I think you know better than me how powerful a half-saint expert is. You should first compromise and acknowledge my position. Not only will you be able to save Mizuhara Kaori's life, but Lord Ming Jinyu will also owe you a favor." "Why not?" Nie Tian's words were very calm and indifferent. However, when Shui Jing heard them, it caused great waves in his heart. Shui Jing was not a fool. On the contrary, he was very smart. Although what Nie Tian said was beneficial to him, if he thought about it carefully, it was the truth. In order to protect Nie Tian, Ming Jinyu was willing to give up on a saint duelist. So how could he let anything happen to Nie Tian? No one knew how strong Ming Jinyu was. However, judging from his strength he had displayed earlier, he could instantly kill the 8 patriarchs. Therefore, even if the 8 patriarchs and everyone from the Jili Demon region refused to acknowledge Nie Tian's identity, they could not do anything to Nie Tian. "Kid, why should I believe you?" Shui Jing's eyes flickered as he asked in a deep voice. "You don't have to believe me. Just trust your own judgment." Nie Tian's lips curled up slightly as he said, "Mizuhara Kaori's current situation is already a dead end. As the new saint duelist, I'm the only one who can save him. Patriarch Shui, your son's life is now in your hands. To save him or not to gamble, it's up to you." Shui Jing could not help but frown when he heard Nie Tian's words. His expression was very conflicted. He did not expect Nie Tian to be so calm. A young human martialist was surrounded by people who wanted to kill him, but he could still maintain his composure. He could even clearly see the situation in front of him. Just this calmness alone was not something an ordinary person could achieve. Shui Jing's eyes flickered as he looked Nie Tian up and down. Lord Saint Duel risked his life to protect this man despite the pressure from the 9 clans. Could it be that he's really someone who can change the fate of the 9 clans? Nie Tian stood where he was with a faint smile on his face. He did not panic in the slightest. "I'll gamble." Looking at Nie Tian, Shui Jing felt a domineering confidence. He immediately steeled his heart and decided to gamble. Since Mizuhara Kaori was already dead, as a father, how could he give up the last hope of saving his son? Seeing the change in Shui Jing's expression, Nie Tian knew that Shui Jing had thought things through and smiled faintly in his heart. "Shui Jing, you are indeed very wise. Kid, I hope you don't disappoint me. Shui Jing's eyes darkened as he thought to himself. He immediately took a step forward and knelt in front of Nie Tian. He said respectfully, Shui Jing, the leader of the Water Fairy tribe, pays his respects to the Saint Duelist. The sudden scene stunned everyone. They were so shocked that they could not speak. Of course, they did not know the conversation between Nie Tian and Shui Jing. They only saw Nie Tian walk over and look at Shui Jing for a while before the latter knelt down. This scene was too strange for everyone. It should be known that Shui Jing hated Nie Tian the most. He was the first to vote for Nie Tian. But now, he was the first to acknowledge Nie Tian's identity as a Saint Duelist and kneel down in front of everyone. How could they not be surprised? Brother Shui, you are... The other leaders of the Water Fairy tribe were stunned for a long time before they reacted. They looked at Shui Jing in shock and did not know what to say. Leader Shui, please rise. Nie Tian did not pay attention to the others. He smiled faintly and gestured for Shui Jing to stand up. Shui Jing nodded slightly and rose to his feet. Then he turned to Little Fatty and the others and said, High Chieftains, I believe that since Lord Nie Tian was chosen by the 9 Li Stone Steel, he must be someone who can influence the fate of our 9 clans. The 9 Li Stone Tablet is the 9 tribes' sacred stone. As the people of the 9 tribes, we should not doubt the sacred stone's choice. Little Fatty and the others were stunned. They stared at each other, speechless for a long time. Shui Jing's change in attitude was too sudden. They could not accept it for a while. At this moment, Ming Jinyu's expression was also stiff. He had no idea what Nie Tian had said to Shui Jing to change his mind. After a while, Ming Jinyu reacted and took a step forward. Leaders, as a former Saint Duelist, there are some things that I cannot tell you. But please think about it. Why did I put in so much effort to protect Nie Tian? I've been a Saint Duelist for hundreds of thousands of years. I have never done anything to let the 9 tribes down. Even when you decided to expel the ancient Ming tribe, I did not oppose it even though I was unwilling. I, Ming Jinyu, can say without guilt that what I am doing now is not for myself or for Nie Tian, but for the 9 tribes. I can only tell you that Nie Tian is very important to the 9 tribes. He really can't die. Ming Jinyu closed his eyes after saying that. The corners of his eyes were moist. Chapter 21:10. When Ming Jinyu spoke, he used a special method so that only the 8 patriarchs could hear him and no one else. There were some things that the fewer people who knew, the better. There were many secrets among the 9 tribes that only the holy duelist knew. Ming Jinyu's words had already revealed too many things. His sincere words stunned the 8 patriarchs, and the expressions on their faces kept changing. At this moment, their minds started to turn. Previously, they had indeed been thinking more about themselves and had not thought about the overall situation. Ming Jinyu and Nie Tian did not know each other, but he was trying his best to protect the latter. There must be a reason for this. From Ming Jinyu's actions as a holy duelist, there was only one real reason. Nie Tian was very important to the 9 tribes. When the 8 tribes discussed to expel the ancient Ming tribe, Ming Jinyu did not oppose it. It could be seen that he had the 9 tribes in his heart. Everything he was doing now was for the sake of the 9 tribes, without the slightest bit of selfishness. After a while, Ming Jinyu opened his eyes again and said in a deep voice, Everyone, please state your positions. This time, the clan leaders were no longer calm. They all looked at each other, eager to give a try. In the end, Mu Xiangshan took a step forward and knelt in front of Nie Tian. He said in a clear voice, Mu Xiangshan, the patriarch of the Wood Elf tribe, pays his respects to Lord Holy Duelist. Mu Patriarch, please rise. Nie Tian smiled faintly and gestured for Mu Xiangshan to rise. Mu Xiangshan's change in attitude was within Nie Tian's expectations, so there was nothing strange about it. Then, He Xinshui also knelt down and said solemnly, He Xinshui, the patriarch of the Black-Scaled Demonic tribe, pays his respects to Lord Holy Duelist. Nie Tian smiled faintly and gestured for He Xinshui to rise. Then, The other patriarchs knelt down one after another and acknowledged Nietion's identity as a holy duelist. Patriarchs, please rise. Nietion took a step forward and gestured for the patriarchs to rise. Everything was developing in the direction that Nietion had expected, and it was going more smoothly than he had expected. Ming Jinyu's tense heart finally relaxed after seeing that all 8 of the high chieftains had acknowledged Nietion's identity. In fact, he had already prepared for the worst. If the 8 patriarchs did not recognize Nietion's identity, he would forcefully take Nietion away. Now that all the patriarchs had acknowledged Nietion's position, this was the best situation. At this time, the members of the 9 clans were completely dumbfounded. Most of them had ugly expressions on their faces. They could never have imagined that their patriarch would actually recognize a human as a holy swordsman. However, the 8 patriarchs had already expressed their stance. Even if the 9 clans were unwilling, there was nothing they could do. Nietion's position as a saint duel had been stabilized. At that moment, Shui Jing nodded slightly and said to Nietion, "Sir Saint Determiner, you have just established your identity. Is there anything you want to tell everyone?" Nietion laughed. Of course, he knew what Shui Jing meant. "Elder Ming, thank you for your trust in me." Nietion looked at Ming Jinyu and said in a loud voice, "Since I am the new holy swordsman of the 9 clans, can I handle Mizuhara Kaori's matter?" Ming Jinyu was startled. He immediately reacted and said, "Of course." He was no fool. He immediately understood what was going on. Earlier, Shui Jing had been the first to acknowledge Nietion's identity, which confused everyone. Now that Nietion had suddenly taken the initiative to propose to handle Mizuhara Kaori's matter, Ming Jinyu naturally understood what was going on. He guessed that Nietion and Shui Jing must have made a deal in secret, and that deal concerned Mizuhara Kaori's life. At that moment, Ming Jinyu really wanted to see how Nietion was going to protect Mizuhara Kaori's life. Mizuhara Kaori had already admitted in front of everyone that he had killed Inyoli and Shuehen. This was a situation where he would definitely die. It would be fine if Inyoli and Shuehen were ordinary people. However, the 2 of them just had to be the princes of the Dark Monsters clan and the Blood Fiend Monsters clan. In that sort of situation, it would definitely not be easy for Nietion to protect Mizuhara Kaori. At that moment, the other clan chiefs also sensed something and looked at Nietion. This was especially true for the Dark Monsters clan and the Blood Fiend Monsters clan's clan chiefs. They looked at Nietion with very strange expressions. The 2 of them were wily old foxes. How could they not see through Nietion's intentions? Nietion smiled faintly. His gaze swept across the group of patriarchs, and he said in a loud voice, "Patriarchs, regarding the matter of Suhara Kaori killing Inyu Li and Shuehen, I believe you still don't know the reason." The Dark Monsters clan's clan chief could tell that there was something wrong with Nietion's tone. He took a step forward and asked in a cold manner, "Lord Holy Swordsman, what do you mean by that?" "Clan Chief Dark, don't be agitated." Nietion smiled faintly and said, "Mizuhara Kaori killed Inyoli and Shuehen. That is a fact. However, this holy swordsman personally witnessed the battle between the 3 of them. The 3 of them fought over the credit of activating the 9 Li Stone Steel. However, Mizuhara Kaori was very powerful. That was why she killed Inyoli and Shuehen. In other words, if Inyoli and Shuehen were powerful, the one who would have died would have been Mizuhara Kaori." Hearing the indifferent voice, everyone frowned and their expressions changed. No one expected that Inyoli and Shuehen would die like that. Although Nietion was defending Mizuhara Kaori, what he said was the truth. Inyoli and Shuehen did indeed have ill intentions. Shui Jing took a step forward and said furiously, "Inyoli and Shuehen actually wanted to fight over the credit of activating the 9 Li Stone Steel. Their deaths are not to be regretted." "Shui Jing, what do you mean by that?" Dark Demon Clan Chief and Lien and Shui Sha Clan Chief Shui Jufeng roared at the same time and looked coldly at Shui Jing. The 9 Li Stone Steel was activated by the Holy Swordsman. Inyoli and Shuehen also wanted to take the credit. Don't they deserve to die? Shui Jing did not back down and said coldly, "Bullish *T. Lien roared furiously and pointed at Mizuhara Kaori. Your son Mizuhara Kaori pretended to be the one who activated the 9 Lee Stone Steel. Doesn't that make him even more deserving of death? That's enough. Shui Jing wanted to say something else, but Nie Tian interrupted him. Everyone was stunned and looked at Nie Tian in shock. They did not expect him to be so domineering. Nie Tian did not care about the crowd's reaction. He stared straight at Lien and Shui Jufeng and asked, 2 clan leaders, this holy swordsman wants to ask you. And Yoli and Shui Hen wanted to take the credit for activating the 9 Lee Stone Steel. Do they deserve to die? And Lien and Shui Jufeng were stunned at the same time. Their expressions turned ugly. After a long while, they said, Holy swordsman, they deserve to die. But even so, it is not Mizuhara Kaori's turn to kill them. Nie Tian raised his eyebrows and said, It is indeed not Mizuhara Kaori's turn to kill in Yoli and Shui Hen. But the 3 of them wanted to take the credit for activating the 9 Lee Stone Steel. Under those circumstances, if Mizuhara Kaori did not kill them, they would kill her. Don't tell me you want Mizuhara Kaori to stand there and let them kill her? Chapter 2111. And Lien and Shui Jufeng were rendered speechless by Nie Tian's questions and did not know how to defend themselves. Even though they knew that Nie Tian was protecting Mizuhara Kaori, they could not refute him. Ming Jinyu's lips curled into a grin as he thought to himself, This human kid, not only is he talented, but he's also quite the talker too. He could be considered a glib tongue. Even though Nie Tian's words clearly offended Mizuhara Kaori, no one could find fault with them. Leader and Leader Shui. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said loudly, Mizuhara Kaori and Yoli and Shui Hen were just dogs biting each other. It's just that Mizuhara Kaori was stronger, so she killed both Yu Li and Shui Hen. In this holy determiner's opinion, these 3 are criminals who deserve to die. And Lien and Shui Jufeng's faces stiffened at Nie Tian's words. And Yoli and Shui Hen were already dead, but Nie Tian still called them dogs in front of everyone. This was too much. However, Nie Tian did not think so. He only said this to kill Lien and Shui Jufeng's prestige. And Yoli and Shui Hen were both cruel and ruthless people. This was not unrelated to their fathers. Since Nie Tian was now a holy determiner, he naturally did not need to fear Lien and Shui Jufeng. Taking advantage of Ming Jinyu's presence to borrow his strength to establish his own prestige was also a method. With Ming Jinyu's intelligence, Ming Jinyu had seen Nie Tian's every move and felt that giving up his position as a holy determiner was a wise choice. Lord Holy Determiner, I admit that Yoli and Shui Hen deserve to die. And Lien calmed down and said solemnly, Then according to you, Mizuhara Kaori deserves to die even more. Please give the order for him to commit suicide in front of everyone. Yes, let him commit suicide in front of everyone. Shui Jufeng agreed and roared at Mizuhara Kaori. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Patriarchs, I only said that Mizuhara Kaori and the other 2 should die, but I didn't say that I wanted to kill them. There are so many people in this world who deserve to die. Do you want to kill them all? Saint Duelist, what do you mean by that? And Lien and Shui Jufeng were stunned, their eyes almost popping out of their sockets. Nie Tian's expression was calm as he smiled and said, What I mean is, although Mizuhara Kaori deserves to die, since he survived, then let him live. Lord Saint Duelist, you. And Lien and Shui Jufeng's eyes trembled violently. They couldn't believe their ears. Only now did they realize that not only was Nie Tian the weakest Saint Duel, he was also the most shameless. Wanting to protect Shuichi Haruka with just a few words was simply unreasonable. Shui Jing was overjoyed and said loudly, Lord Saint Duelist is wise. Lord Saint Duelist is benevolent. Mizuhara Kaori was even more stunned. Her small mouth was wide open, but she couldn't make a sound. She never thought that Nie Tian would actually save her. The other patriarchs were also dumbfounded. They were almost confused by Nie Tian's words. Patriarch and Patriarch Shui, I know you are not satisfied, but this Saint Duelist is a benevolent person. Nietian looked at Lien and Xue Jufeng, who were trembling in anger, and said calmly, "If Yoli and Xuehen were still alive, this Saint Duelist would not have killed them either." And Lien and Xue Jufeng's expressions were extremely ugly. They wished they could swallow Niet Tian alive. However, they didn't dare, because Niet Tian was a Saint Duelist. Ming Jinyu looked at Niet Tian and frowned. He thought to himself, "Niet Tian, although you've saved Shuichi Haruka's life by doing this, you've also completely offended the Dark Monstrous Clan and the Bloody Fiend Monstrous Clan. Those two great clans are the strongest among the 9 clans. If they are dissatisfied, it will be extremely detrimental to the unity of the 9 clans." Niet Tian's methods were very smooth, but they weren't brilliant. His actions would definitely cause discord between the Water Fairy clan, the Dark Monstrous Clan, and the Bloody Fiend Monstrous Clan. If anything were to happen in the future, it was very likely that a war would break out between the 3 clans. Ming Jinyu felt that although Niet Tian was very smart, he was still too young. Patriarch and Patriarch Xue. Right at that moment, Niet Tian spoke again. He said, "I know that the 2 of you are in a bad mood after losing your beloved son. This Saint Duelist is not an unreasonable person. I've decided to give your 2 clans a gift as compensation." "A gift?" And Lien and Xue Jufeng were stunned. Afterwards, they revealed cold, disdainful expressions. How could they not tell that Niet Tian was trying to establish his might and trust them? He wanted to slap them first, then give them a candy. However, they were not children. Using such methods on them was nothing. Moreover, they did not believe that a human brat who was only a late overgod would have anything good on him. "What? Are the 2 of you looking down on this Saint Duelist?" Niet Tian glanced at the 2 of them and saw through their thoughts with a single glance. He sneered. "We wouldn't dare," and Lien and Xue Jufeng replied, but their faces were filled with disdain. "I'm only a human late overgod. It's only right for you to look down on me." Niet Tian smiled faintly. "Since that's the case, I'll keep this magical crystal for myself." With these words, Niet Tian waved his palm, and the 9 ultimates appeared. Immediately afterwards, a vortex of time appeared, and the surrounding space trembled. Then, a huge black boulder that was hundreds of meters wide appeared, lying in midair like an enormous black beast. "It's good that I keep such a huge magical crystal for myself. It'll be helpful for my cultivation in the future," said Niet Tian as he observed the changes in Lien and Xue Jufeng's expressions. He had taken out the super magical crystal that he and Mu Shi had found in the demon abyss of myriad degrees. "Oh my god, what is this?" Everyone's eyes trembled the moment they saw the super magical crystal. They cried out in surprise. Many people's eyes immediately reddened. They stared at the super magical crystal without blinking. They had never seen such a huge magical crystal before. Regular magical crystals were only the size of a fist. Among the 9 clans, the Blood Fiend Monstrous Clan had a 10-meter wide magical crystal. It was the largest one. But now, a huge magical crystal several hundred meters wide had appeared in front of them. How could they not be shocked? And Lien and Xue Jufeng stared at the huge black rock in front of them. Their eyes were wide open and their expressions were stiff. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that there was such a huge magical crystal in the demon abyss. The 9 clans were extremely familiar with the aura of magical crystals. They were certain that the huge black rock was definitely a magical crystal. Not only in Lien and Xue Jufeng, but the other clan leaders were also stunned. They held their breaths and did not dare to breathe too loudly. Niet Tian's lips curled up slightly when he saw their reactions. He said loudly, "Clan leader and Clan leader Xue, I was planning to give this super magical crystal to your 2 clans as compensation. But since you look down on this saint, then forget it. I'll keep it for myself." Chapter 21:12. As Niet Tian spoke, he pretended to put away the super demonic crystal. His actions startled Lien and Xue Jufeng. "Lord Holy Duelist, wait." And Lien and Xue Jufeng reacted at almost the same time and cried out in a shrill voice. They were too excited. They had never seen such a huge, super demonic crystal in their lives. Such a huge demonic crystal could definitely nurture countless talented martial artists. What? Is there something you want? Nietion asked cold after a pause and raising his eyebrows. And Lien gulped. He felt that his lips were a little dry. He took a step forward and respectfully said with blazing eyes, Lord Holy Duelist, we were in the wrong just now. Lord Holy Duelist's gift came at the right time. It can help us walk out of the pain of losing our son. As he spoke, and Lien's eyes trembled. It was unknown whether he was sad or excited, but he actually squeezed out a tear. Shui Jufeng quickly took a step forward and nodded heavily. He was afraid that Nietion would really take the demonic crystal back. Yes. Lord Holy Duelist's gift came at the right time, just in time. Nietion was stunned for a moment. He couldn't help but find it funny. These two really had personalities. They were closer to the demonic crystal than they were to their son. All right, since the two of you say so, I'll give this demonic crystal to your two clans. Nietion waved his hand and said, each of your clans will take half. Don't damage the harmony. Of course. And Lien and Shui Jufeng nodded repeatedly. Their old faces were like two blooming chrysanthemums. The other clan leaders were all stunned by what they saw. Who would have thought that Nietion would really give a super demonic crystal to the Dark Goblin tribe and the Bloody Fiend tribe? Nietion was stunned when he saw the other clan leaders' bloodshot eyes. He thought to himself, could it be that I was too rash in giving this super demonic crystal away? It must be said that Nietion's method of giving a candy after a slap was correct. However, this candy was a little too much. He wasn't a member of the 9 clans, so he had no idea how valuable a 100-meter-long super mana crystal was. It would not be an exaggeration to say that even if everyone from the Dark Monstrous clan and the Blood Fiend Monstrous clan were to absorb the power of the demon crystal together, it would still take them several decades or even several hundred years to completely absorb it. With this super demon crystal, the strength of the Dark Monstrous clan and the Blood Fiend Monstrous clan would increase by a whole level. It was precisely because of this that Lien and Shui Jufeng were so emotional that they even forgot the pain of losing their son. Ming Jinyu stared blankly from the side, unable to utter a single word for a long time. Nietion's generosity made him feel inferior. If he had found such a super magical crystal, he would not have given it away so easily. At this moment, the most vexed person was Mu Xiangshan. He knew that this super mana crystal had definitely been discovered by Nietion and Mu Shi together. If Nietion had kept it, he would have given at least half of it to the Wood Elves. But now there was nothing left. Nietion, you are truly a wastrel. Mu Xiangshan's aged face scrunched up as he said in vexation. However, Nietion did not feel anything. The way he saw it, it was only a demon crystal. It didn't matter. Clan leaders, today's matter ends here. If there's nothing else, you can all disperse. After dealing with Shui Yuan Kaori's matter, Nietion began to worry about Di Shurtion's safety and planned to leave as soon as possible. The clan leaders bid their farewells one after another and led their clansmen away. Right at this moment, Shui Jing walked over with Shui Yuan Kaori in tow. Facing Nietion again, Shui Yuan Kaori's feelings were very complicated. That was because just half a day ago, he had thought of Nietion as an ant that he could kill at any moment. Yet now, Nietion had actually become the most respected holy duel expert of the 9 clans. Most importantly, Nietion had saved his life. Lord Holy Duel Expert, thank you for saving my life. Shui Yuan Kaori bowed deeply and sincerely thanked Nietion. Nietion smiled faintly and said, Shui Yuan Kaori, your talent is very good, but your temperament is too arrogant and ruthless. After today's matter, I hope that you will be enlightened. I look forward to your growth. Yes. Shui Yuan Kaori nodded heavily and said, Shui Yuan Kaori will definitely not disappoint Lord Holy Duel Expert's expectations. If Nietion had said such words before, Shui Yuan Kaori would definitely have thought that it was a kind of insult. But now, with Nietion's status, he was completely qualified to say such words. Nietion nodded with a smile and did not say anything else. After Shueyuan Kaori and the others left, Ming Jinyu said a few words to Nietian and also left. After everyone left, Nietian followed Mu Xiangshan and the others back to Greenwood Empire. After returning to Greenwood Imperial Palace, Nietian immediately returned to his small courtyard. In the small courtyard, he could not wait to open the 9 extremes and let Rui, Qianyu, Fat Cat, and the others out. Fat, how is Sakura? Nietian was most worried about Sakura's safety at this time and asked nervously. Fat Cat's blue eyes flickered, and its expression was somewhat solemn. It actually did not speak for a long time. Fat, what exactly happened? Say something. Nietian saw Fat Cat's reaction, and his heart suddenly sank as he urged. Sakura forcefully broke the seal of the blood-weeping sword infant, but suffered the backlash of the blood-weeping sword infant. This made Nietian very worried. Now that Fat Cat had such a reaction, the ominous feeling in his heart became even stronger. Sakura's injury was related to Nietian. If something really happened to the former, Nietian would feel guilty. Nietian, Sakura's current situation is not optimistic. You must be mentally prepared. Fat Cat sighed and finally spoke. Fat, how is he? Nietian was even more anxious in his heart. He could not wait to immediately run into the 9 extremes and take a look for himself. Fat Cat's eyes tightened and said, Nietian, you know that Sakura is a person whose soul has been reborn. His martial body has been remodeled and is not fully mature. It is still in the period of development and is unstable in all aspects. The backlash of the blood-weeping sword intent is too strong. Sakura's martial body could not bear it and was destroyed. Martial body was destroyed? Nietian was stunned and asked, what does this mean? Sakura has returned to the state of soul again. Fat Cat nodded heavily and said with a dignified face, this. Nietian's eyes trembled and he was stunned all of a sudden. Sakura's martial body was destroyed and returned to the state of soul again. This was something he never thought of. However, this news was not too desperate. After all, Sakura's soul was still there. As long as his body was remodeled, he could be resurrected again. But looking at Fat Cat's current reaction, it seemed that the situation was worse than this. Fat, did something happen to Sakura's soul? Nietian's eyes trembled and he asked nervously. Yes. Fat Cat's eyes flickered and he nodded helplessly. Chapter 21:13. Nietian looked at Fat Cat's dignified expression, and his heart suddenly sank. It seemed that Dishir Tian's situation was more serious than he had expected. Fat, what's the situation with Dishir Tian now? Forcing himself to calm down, cold sweat appeared on Nietian's forehead, and he almost roared. Fat Cat took a deep breath and said, Dishir Tian's martial body was reconstructed, and it hasn't been completely integrated with his soul. Now that his martial body is destroyed, his soul has no support, and it has become very unstable. What's more troublesome is that the blood-weeping sword infant is very powerful. After destroying Dishir Tian's martial body, it is nibbling away his soul little by little. So his soul is slowly weakening and slowly disappearing. His soul is disappearing. Nietian's pupil shrank, and he directly screamed out. The disappearance of his soul also meant that Dishir Tian would be completely dead. Fat, Dishir Tian's soul could exist before. Can't we use special means to protect his soul now? After being stunned for a few seconds, Nietian finally calmed down and asked anxiously, It's impossible. Fat Cat shook his head helplessly and said, The blood-weeping sword infant's counterattack is too strong, and Dishir Tian's soul is too weak. Even the 3-life stone can't protect his soul. Nietian was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. How could he not know that Fat Cat cared more about Dishir Tian than he did? If there was really a way, Fat Cat would definitely not be so helpless. Fat, how long can Dishir Tian's soul exist? After a moment, Nietian's eyes trembled, and he asked in a deep voice, 3 days at most. Fat Cat sighed, and there was a clear trace of moisture in his eyes. 3 days. Nietian pondered for a moment, and his eyes suddenly became determined, and he said, 3 days. We must not give up. I believe that there must be a way to save Di Tian. Nye Tian, you. Fat Cat was struck dumb for a second. She wanted to say something, but swallowed her words in the end. He knew Nye Tian very well. The latter was the kind of person who would not shed a tear in the face of a coffin and would not turn back even if he ran into a wall. No matter what he faced, even in the most desperate situation, Nye Tian would never give up. Fatty, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Sakura for the next 3 days. I'll think of a way to save him. Nye Tian completely calmed down, and his gaze was incomparably firm. All right. Fat Cat nodded heavily. Even though he knew that there wasn't much hope, he still wanted to fight alongside Nye Tian. Next, Fat Cat asked Rui Chinyu to enter 9 extremities with him because the latter's 9 colored pupils could help stabilize Sakura's soul. Without any hesitation, Nye Tian left the small courtyard and went to find Mu Xiangshan. Soon, Nye Tian arrived at the palace hall, and Mu Xiangshan was in the hall. Lord Holy Determiner, why are you here? Mu Xiangshan's attitude was much more respectful when facing Nye Tian again. After all, the identity of the other party was different. Mu Clan leader, I have something to ask of you. Nye Tian didn't say any nonsense and directly told him about Sakura's situation. After listening to Nye Tian, Mu Xiangshan couldn't help but sink into contemplation and didn't speak for a long time. Mu Clan leader, do you have a way to save him? Nye Tian was a little impatient and asked anxiously. He didn't have much time. If Mu Xiangshan couldn't find a way, he would look for other people. Lord Holy Determiner, can I see your friend? Mu Xiangshan didn't answer Nye Tian's question, but frowned and asked. Nye Tian thought for a while and still took out 9 extremities. He said, Mu Clan leader, Sakura's soul is currently unstable. You can enter 9 extremities to take a look. Mu Xiangshan nodded and entered 9 extremities. After a while, he came out with an even more solemn expression. Mu Clan leader, how is it? Nye Tian's heart sank when he saw Mu Xiangshan's expression wasn't right. As the Wood Spirit Clan's leader, Mu Xiangshan's perception was very strong. He must have seen something. Lord Holy Determiner, I'm afraid your friend can't be saved. Mu Xiangshan shook his head and his eyes flickered. Nye Tian saw that Mu Xiangshan was hiding something from him, so he couldn't help but frown and ask in a cold tone, Mu Clan leader, I only want to ask you, do you have a way to save him? Mu Xiangshan looked at Nye Tian and hesitated for a long time before finally saying, Lord Holy Determiner, you should know that your friend suffered a backlash from the blood-weeping sword soul. The blood-weeping sword soul is something from the Julie demon domain and one of the 3 great flowers of the ancient Ming race. Get to the point. Nye Tian already knew what Mu Xiangshan was talking about, so he didn't want to listen to his nonsense. Lord Holy Determiner, the ancient Ming race has 3 great flowers, and the blood-weeping sword soul is one of them. Mu Xiangshan wasn't angry. He nodded and said, there is another kind of flower called the 9-demon fire fox. The 9-demon fire fox is the bane of the blood-weeping sword soul. As long as you can find the 9-demon fire fox, you will be able to resist the backlash of the blood-weeping sword soul. Your friend will be saved. 9-demon fire fox. Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and a strange light flickered in them. What he needed to do now was to find a way to resist the backlash of the blood-weeping sword soul and protect Indra's soul. He had the dragon spring vein, so as long as he could protect Indra's soul, it wouldn't be difficult to reconstruct his body. According to Mu Xiangshan, the 9-demon fire fox was the bane of the blood-weeping sword soul. As long as he could find the 9-demon fire fox, he would be able to resist the backlash of the blood-weeping sword soul. However, the 9-demon fire fox was also one of the 3 wondrous flowers of the ancient Ming race. Where would Nye Tian go to find it? Patriarch Mu, do you know where to find a 9-demon fire fox? Nye Tian became cold and asked. I don't know. Mu Xiangshan shook his head and said, the 3 wondrous flowers of the ancient Ming race are a secret of the ancient Ming race. Other than the ancient Ming, very few people know where they are. Lord Saint Terminator, you can ask His Highness. He must know where the 3 wondrous flowers are. Lian Jiufeng. Nye Tianling smiled coldly and said, my friend is in this state because of him. This Mu Xiangshan was stunned and didn't say anything else. Nietian only had 3 days. It was too late to find Lian Jiufeng now. The latter must have returned to the 9 realms already. Ancient Ming race. While thinking, Nietian's eyes suddenly trembled. He shouted, "Lord Ming Jinyu, isn't he an ancient Ming?" Nietian was so anxious that he forgot for a moment that there was an ancient Ming next to him. Ming Jinyu had said before that he was an ancient Ming. Ming Jinyu was a Saint Terminator, so his status in the ancient Ming race was definitely not low. He definitely knew where the 9 Demon Fire Fox was. Nietian didn't wait any longer. He prepared to find Ming Jinyu immediately. "Patriarch Mu, please accompany me to see Lord Ming Jinyu." Nietian didn't know where to find Ming Jinyu, so he asked Mu Xiangshan to lead the way. "Lord Saint Terminator, Lord Ming Jinyu lives in the 7 Absolute Peaks. It's easy to find him. Go find him yourself. I won't be going." Unexpectedly, Mu Xiangshan refused Nietian's request. A trace of panic flashed through his eyes. In his opinion, the 7 Absolute Peaks was a very dangerous place. "Sure," Nietian answered, then turned around and left. Chapter 21:14. 9 Demon Territory. In a mountain range that stretched on endlessly, 7 steep peaks stood towering like 7 giants that could support the heavens and the earth. The 7 peaks weren't far from each other and reached the clouds. They were the most dangerous places in the entire Jili Demon Realm, the 7 Absolute Peaks. The highest peak of the 7 Absolute Peaks was known as the Heaven's Horizon. The previous Saint Duelist of the 9 ancient clans lived there. At this moment, a figure appeared not far from the 7 Absolute Peaks. His silver hair fluttered in the wind. It was Nietian. Nietian learned from Mu Xiangshan that Ming Jinyu lived in the 7 Absolute Peaks. Thus, he rushed here without stopping. However, when he approached the 7 Absolute Peaks, he discovered that the entire mountain was enveloped by a boundless formation. He couldn't get close at all. Nietian helplessly called out Fat Cat and asked, "Fat, do you have a way to break this formation?" Eyebrows furrowed. The fat little cat shook its head and said, "Nietian, this grand spell formation is very special. I can't break it." Nietian's face sank. A formation that even Fat Cat couldn't break was indeed unusual. "What should I do?" Nietian frowned. Sure Tian's life was in danger. He didn't have time to waste here. "I can't care too much. I'll risk it." In the next moment, Nietian decisively activated the 3 forbidden techniques in his body. His aura skyrocketed to the limit and released a sharp sword aura. "Nietian, are you crazy?" Fat Cat couldn't help but shout. "You're courting death if you want to break the formation with your current strength." It was obvious that Nietian wanted to break the formation. However, with his current strength, not only could he not break the formation, but there was a high chance that he would be killed by the formation. Sure Tian doesn't have much time left. "I can't wait any longer." Nietian responded in a deep voice. Starlight Heavenly Slash appeared in his hand, and his body began to release a powerful sword intent. Stop right now." Fat Cat was shocked. Although he could not break the formation in front of him, he could feel that this formation contained an extremely terrifying power. Nietian's current actions were simply courting death. However, it was already too late. Nietian blurred into action and slashed his sword down with all his might. Boom! The shadow of the sword was like a mountain, crashing down and bombarding the formation. Immediately, the terrifying power of the formation was stirred up, and the space within a radius of tens of thousands of meters was directly shattered. And just as Nietian struck out with his sword, a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. With a flap of his wings, he retreated several tens of thousands of meters. Although Nietian was anxious, he did not lose his rationality. The moment he made his move, he was already prepared to retreat. However, the power of the formation triggered by the sword was still far beyond his expectations. It actually shattered the surrounding space. That was close. When Nietian retreated to a safe place, he couldn't help but inhale a mouthful of cold air. If he had been slightly slower, he would have been swept into the spatial storm. Following that, the shattered space slowly mended, and the entire formation was restored to its original state. Nietian wasn't surprised to see this scene. He only waited quietly to the side. His intention was not to break through the formation, but to create a disturbance so that Ming Jinyu would be aware of it. Even though he didn't know how strong this formation was, he at least knew his own limits. With his strength, it was impossible for him to break through the formation. Nietian, you were too impulsive earlier. This formation is more terrifying than I imagined. Fat Cat understood Nietian's intention, but he still had a frightened expression on his face. It was indeed dangerous earlier. If Nietian had retreated a step later, the consequences would have been unimaginable. A moment later, a gap suddenly appeared on the formation, and a figure walked out from it. It was Ming Jinyu, Sir Saint Duelist. Ming Jinyu was stunned when he saw Nietian's figure in midair. He asked in astonishment, "Were you the one who broke into the 7-terminal formation just now?" "Elder Ming, I had something urgent to attend to. I had no choice but to do so. Please don't take it to heart." Nietian apologized with a slight bow. He then moved to Ming Jinyu's side. Ming Jinyu regained his calm and said, "Sir Saint Duelist, let's talk inside." With these words, Ming Jinyu and Nietian entered the 7-terminal grand formation. "Sir Saint Duelist, you should know that what you did earlier was too risky. Fortunately, your strength isn't strong. Otherwise, once the 7-terminal formation's true power is triggered, the entire mountain range will be destroyed," Ming Jinyu said fearfully as he looked at Nietian. Ming Jinyu was slightly surprised that Nietian had broken into the 7-terminal formation. However, he wasn't angry. Instead, he was worried. Fortunately, Nietian's strength wasn't too strong. If a peak supreme god attacked the 7-terminal formation, it would definitely trigger a counterattack. At that time, everything within a radius of several 100,000 meters would be completely destroyed by the formation. I was too reckless. Nietian apologized awkwardly. I really had something urgent to see Elder Ming. Otherwise, I wouldn't have acted like this. What's wrong? Did something big happen? Ming Jinyu looked at Nietian with a worried expression. Although he hadn't interacted with Nietian for a long time, he could tell that the latter's temperament was far beyond that of an ordinary person. If it was something trivial, Nietian wouldn't have acted so recklessly. But judging from Nietian's current expression, something big must have happened. "Elder Ming, it's a little complicated. I can't explain it in a short time. Let's find a place to talk first," Nietian said in a deep voice. "All right." Ming Jinyu agreed and quickly brought Nietian to the main peak of the 7-terminal peak, Heaven's Cliffs. After a short while, the two figures appeared in the main hall of Heaven's Cliffs. At this time, Nietian discovered that the hall he was in was located halfway up Heaven's Cliffs. He couldn't imagine how high this mountain was. Heaven's Cliffs is the highest peak of the 7-terminal peak. Its peak is several 100,000 meters high, and there are extremely violent 9 heavens astral winds at its peak. Even I have only been there a few times. Ming Jinyu could tell what Nietian was thinking about. Nietian nodded in shock. Then his expression changed, and he said, "Elder Ming, I came to you because I need your help with something." Ming Jinyu knitted his brows and said with a forced smile, "What a coincidence. I also need your help with something." Nietian was stunned for a moment. Then he said, "Elder Ming, my matter concerns the life and death of a person. Please help me." "All right, Elder Ming, please speak first." Ming Jinyu's expression sank, and he signaled Nietian to sit down. Following that, Nietian told him everything about Indra in detail from beginning to end. In the end, he said, "Elder Ming, Indra is my friend. Please, you must save him." After listening to Nietian, Ming Jinyu's expression became gloomy and solemn. He remained silent for a long time without saying a word. Chapter 21:15. Originally, Nietian thought that Ming Jinyu would agree without hesitation. He didn't think that the latter's reaction would be like this. It was as if Ming Jinyu had something he couldn't say. Nietian, the blood-weeping sword soul, is indeed one of the 3 wondrous flowers of the ancient Ming race. However, ever since the ancient Ming race was chased out of the Nine-Li Devil realm, I haven't seen a blood-weeping sword soul for hundreds of thousands of years. Ming Jinyu looked at Nie Tian and said solemnly, Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. Elder Ming, are you saying that the Nine-Li Devil realm doesn't have a blood-weeping sword soul anymore? Yes. Ming Jinyu nodded and said, I'm also curious. The person you speak of is Swordmaster Wu, Xian Zongfeng. Why would he have a blood-weeping sword soul? Nie Tian frowned. The worry on his face became even more obvious. If Ming Jinyu hadn't seen a blood-weeping sword soul for hundreds of thousands of years, then he definitely didn't know where the Nine-Demon Fire Fox was. In that case, things would be troublesome. Nie Tian remembered that Lian Jiufeng had been very surprised when he had drawn out the blood-weeping sword soul in Disher Tian's body. It seemed that Lian Jiufeng hadn't seen the blood-weeping sword soul either. Of course, he wouldn't know where the Nine-Demon Fire Fox was. Nie Tian, if you want to find a Nine-Demon Fire Fox, you must find that person called Xian Zongfeng, Ming Jinyu said solemnly after a moment of silence. Xian Zongfeng. Nie Tian frowned. He had thought of Xian Zongfeng before. After all, the blood-weeping sword soul in Disher Tian's body was related to this person. If Xian Zongfeng had the blood-weeping sword soul, then it was very likely that he had the Nine-Demon Fire Fox. Unfortunately, Xian Zongfeng had escaped and disappeared. Xian Zongfeng was very strong, close to peak experts. If he hid, it would be very difficult to find him. The most troublesome thing was that Nie Tian only had 3 days. Within 3 days, the blood-weeping sword infant would devour Sakura's soul, and by that time, everything would be too late. Elder Ming, I remember now. Xian Zongfeng doesn't seem to be from the Nine Realms. He once activated the elf protection, so his real identity must be an elf. Nie Tian suddenly thought of this and asked, is it possible that he is from the Nine-Li Demon Realm? Moreover, they are from the 5 great fairy clans. Fat Cat had once said that the spirit protection was the innate magical power of the spirit tribe. It was a kind of protective power that came from their bloodline. It was very holy, and it was a kind of power that was close to holy power. However, the spirit protection could only be used once in a lifetime. After using it, the protective power within the spirit's body would disappear. Back then, when Xian Zongfeng fought with Master Qian Yu's Windfire Qian Yu, he used the elven protection to escape. Since Xian Zongfeng could use the elf guardian, it meant that he was an elf. There were 5 great fairy races in the Nine-Li Demon Realm, and the blood-weeping sword nascent soul had once appeared in the Nine-Li Demon Realm. From the looks of it, Xian Zongfeng was most likely from the Juli magic region, and possibly from the 5 elven clans. The elven protection. Hearing Nie Tian's words, Ming Jinyu couldn't help but be stunned. He actually cried out, did you say that the person called Xian Zongfeng activated the elven protection? Yes. Nie Tian didn't expect Ming Jinyu to have such a big reaction. He nodded slightly and asked, Elder Ming, is there anything wrong? Of course not. Ming Jinyu frowned and said, Lord Saint, you should know that the power of the elven protection does exist, but not all elves can activate it. As far as I know, none of the 5 great fairy races in the Nine-Li Demon Realm can activate the elven protection. Even the 5 chiefs can't activate it. This, Nie Tian was stunned. Obviously, he didn't expect it to be like this. After calming down, Nie Tian asked, Elder Ming, is it very difficult to activate the elven protection? Ming Jinyu frowned and said, the elven protection is a kind of power that exists in the spirit tribe's bloodline. Only the elves with a strong enough bloodline can activate the elven protection. Not to mention ordinary elves, even Mizuhara Kaori, can't activate the elven protection. Nie Tian's face darkened and he was stunned on the spot. Mizuhara Kaori possessed the 5 elemental spirit tribe's bloodline. She was definitely the one with the strongest bloodline among the 5 great fairy races. Even she couldn't activate the elven protection. Could it be that Xian Zongfeng's bloodline was stronger than Mizuhara Kaori's? In Nie Tian's eyes, it was impossible because he had seen Xian Zongfeng's strength. Although he was strong, he was still lacking compared to a peak human expert. From this, it could be seen that Xian Zongfeng's talent wasn't top-notch, so his bloodline power wouldn't be too strong. Then, why could Xian Zongfeng activate the elven protection that even Mizuhara Kaori couldn't? This was simply too strange. Ming Jinyu knew what Nye Tian was thinking, so he said in a deep voice, "Lord Saint Duel, I also have the same question in my heart. If we want to know the answer, we must ask the chiefs of the 5 great elf clans." "All right, we'll go look for them now." Nye Tian was anxious and was about to leave. "Lord Saint, we don't have to leave. Just wait here, I'll gather them." Ming Jinyu took a step forward and stopped Nye Tian. He then took out a jade badge and inserted his divine sense into it. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He immediately understood that the jade badge in Ming Jinyu's hand must be used to contact the chiefs of the other fairies. Sure enough, about half an hour later, the 5 elven patriarchs appeared in the main hall. They weren't stopped by the 7-terminal formation because Ming Jinyu had opened the formation in advance. "Lord Saint, Lord Ming Jinyu, is there anything you need from us?" The 5-eyed chieftains' faces were filled with fear as they didn't know why Nye Tian and Ming Jinyu had summoned them. 5 patriarchs. "The reason I've called you here is actually for my personal matters." Nye Tian nodded slightly and then told him about the matter of Sakura Heaven. Of course, he emphasized the existence of Xian Zongfeng. In the end, Nye Tian voiced out his doubt. "I can see that Xian Zongfeng's strength isn't at its peak, so his bloodline power isn't that strong. But why is he able to activate the elven protection?" After hearing Nye Tian's words, the faces of the 5 chiefs turned gloomy at the same time, as if there was something they couldn't say. "Chiefs, a human life is at stake. If you have anything to say, please don't hold back and say it." Ming Jinyu frowned when he saw that the 5 chiefs were silent. "5 patriarchs, Sakura is very important to me, and his injury was caused by me. If I can't save him, I really feel guilty in my heart. Please help me." Nye Tian also took a step forward and said earnestly. The 5 chiefs looked at each other and seemed to be communicating. After a while, they finally made a decision. The chief of the water fairy, Shui Jing, would explain everything to Nye Tian. Chapter 21:16. Dark Elves. Hearing those words, Nye Tian was startled. That was because he had never heard of that name before. Ming Jinyu's expression also turned sluggish. Evidently, he had never heard of Dark Elves either. Shui Jing seemed to have anticipated Nye Tian and Ming Jinyu's reaction. He was not surprised at all. Instead, he laughed bitterly and said, "Everyone believes that there are only 5 ancient eras elves, namely our 5 great elf clans. The other elves are all branches of the 5 great elf clans. They cannot be considered to be true ancient eras elves. Even the majority of the people from the 5 great elf clans believe that. Only a very small number of elves know that the ancient eras elves are not limited to the 5 great elf clans. There are also 2 other elves." Speaking till here, Shui Jing's expression turned gloomy. It could even be said to be serious. Nye Tian and Ming Jinyu looked at each other in shock. Fat Cat had once told Nye Tian that the ancient era's elves were the 5 great elf clans. But now, it would appear that Fat Cat was mistaken. There were other ancient era's elves in this world. Shui Jing took a deep breath and said, "The ancient era's elves are divided into 2 lineages and 7 clans. The 2 lineages are respectively the Yin-Yang lineage and the 5 Elements lineage. The 5 Elements lineage refers to our 5 great elf clans. As for the Yin-Yang lineage, it refers to the Yin elves and Sun elves. These 2 elves are also known as the Dark Elves and the Light Elves." After saying that, Shui Jing looked to Nye Tian and said, "The Xian Zongfeng that Lord Saint Duel mentioned earlier is very likely someone from the Dark Elves." Nye Tian's gaze was focused. He was deeply shocked by Shui Jing's words. He never expected that other than the 5 Elements elves, there were also Yin-Yang elves. From Shui Jing's expression, it seemed that the Yin-Yang elves were existences even more powerful than the 5 Elements elves. "Chief Shui, could it be that the Yin-Yang elves are even more powerful than your 5 Elements elves?" asked Nye Tian with a frown. "Amen." Shui Jing nodded heavily. The yin-yang elves are far more powerful than the five elements elves. Furthermore, their bloodline power is the yin-yang elves. That power allows them to activate the elf protection. It's not an exaggeration to say that even the top geniuses among the elves of the five elemental lineage can't compare to the average elves of the yin-yang lineage. So that's how it is. Nietion gasped in shock. Now he finally understood why Mizuhara Kori could not activate the spirit protection, but Xian Zongfeng could. Xian Zongfeng was a night elf. His bloodline power was the power of yin and yang, which made it easier for him to activate the elf protection. After calming down, Nietion asked with a frown, Chief Shui, are the yin-yang elves not in the nine-lead demon domain? No. Shui Jing shook his head and said, although the yin-yang lineage's elves and the five elements lineage's elves are both ancient era's elves, they were separated from the five elements lineage a long time ago. Nietion's eyes flickered as he asked nervously, where are the yin-yang elves now? Right now, it was practically certain that Xian Zongfeng was a night elf. Since he was not in the nine-lead demon domain, where could he be? Hearing Nietion's question, Shui Jing's gaze flickered. He seemed to be avoiding the question. Soon after, he looked to Ming Jinyu, as if seeking his opinion. Ming Jinyu looked at Shui Jing and directly said, Shui Jing, we've already come this far. If there's anything you want to say, go ahead and say it. There is no need to have any misgivings. Shui Jing nodded slightly. Then he took a deep breath and said, the yin-yang elves are in the abandoned land. Abandoned land. Hearing Shui Jing say that name, Ming Jinyu was startled. Then he directly shouted it out. The other elf chiefs also had unsightly expressions on their faces. They were all very serious. Abandoned land. Nietion frowned and asked, what kind of place is that? For Ming Jinyu and the others to be so shocked, it was sufficient to prove that it was an extremely dangerous place. Shui Jing's expression was gloomy. He did not say anything, and instead looked to Ming Jinyu. At this time, Ming Jinyu's old face was as gloomy as water. After a long period of silence, he let out a long sigh and said, could this be the will of the heavens? Nietion looked at Ming Jinyu with a puzzled expression. He did not understand what the latter meant. Ming Jinyu looked at Nietion and slowly asked, Sir Saint Executor, do you really want to know what the abandoned land is? Yes. Nietion nodded heavily, his eyes filled with eagerness. Since the yin-yang elves were in the abandoned land, then Xian Zongfeng must have come from this place, and it was very likely that he had escaped back to this place. In order to find Xian Zongfeng, one must go to the abandoned land. Sir Saint Executor, the abandoned land is a very special world. Ming Jinyu let out a long sigh and said, it is an area between a domain and a sacred world. Nietion frowned. His expression suddenly changed as he said in astonishment, sacred world? Could it be the world of saints? Ming Jinyu's eyes flickered. Then he nodded and said, yes, saints do exist. The world of saints is called the sacred world. The abandoned land is a world formed by the fragments of the sacred world after the sacred world collapsed. Fragments of the sacred world? Nietion was stunned once again. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing, and it was very surprising to him. Yes, fragments of the sacred world. Ming Jinyu nodded heavily and said, the so-called fragments of the sacred world are the fragments of the space-time after the sacred world collapsed. The abandoned land is formed by countless fragments of the sacred world space-time. The space-time of the abandoned land is more stable than a domain, but it is also weaker than the sacred world. Therefore, it is a special existence between a domain and a sacred world. Listening to Ming Jinyu's explanation, Nietion was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. Of course, he could understand Ming Jinyu's words, but the latter's words were too shocking and exceeded his current understanding of the world. So far, Nietion had a general understanding of the world's hierarchy, which was divided into three major levels: planar world, domain, and sacred world. In the beginning, the 3,000 small worlds, Meru world, heavenly realm, and divine realm were all planar world. The God awakening domain, God function domain, and the other 9 major domains were all domains. Above the domains was the legendary Sacred World. However, Nietion had never seen the Sacred World. The Abandoned Land was a special world formed by the fragments of the Sacred World after the Sacred World collapsed. It was an existence between a domain and a Sacred World. What shocked Nietion the most was that he couldn't understand why the Sacred World would collapse. Planar world, domain, and Sacred World, the strength of the space-time was getting stronger and stronger. From Nietion's point of view, the 9 major domains were already indestructible worlds, and the Sacred World was obviously more stable than the 9 major domains. How could such a world collapse? However, this was not the question he needed to think about now. What he needed to do now was to enter the Abandoned Land. Since Xian Zongfeng could enter the 9 major domains from the Abandoned Land, it undoubtedly meant that there was a space-time tunnel between the Abandoned Land and the 9 major domains. Chapter 21:17. Behind the palace, Nietion let out a long sigh as he looked at Ming Jinyu and said, "Elder Ming, do you know how to enter the Forsaken Lands?" Ming Jinyu was taken aback by Nietion's question. He could sense the determination in the latter's eyes. "Lord Saint Duelist, are you sure you want to enter the Forsaken Land?" Ming Jinyu calmed himself down and asked with a serious expression. Nietion nodded his head heavily. As long as he could save Sakura, even if it was a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, he would still charge into it. "All right, since that's the case, there's no need for me to hide anything." Ming Jinyu nodded and let out a long breath before he said, "In fact, the 3 wondrous flowers of the ancient Ming tribe were obtained from the Abandoned Land." "What?" Ming Jinyu's words caused Nietion and the 5 patriarchs to exclaim in shock. None of them had expected that the 3 flowers of the ancient Ming race had actually been obtained from the Forsaken Land. Could it be that someone from the ancient Ming tribe had entered the Abandoned Land before? The Forsaken Land was clearly a higher-level world than the 9-Li Demon Realm. Someone had entered the Forsaken Land and was able to come out alive. Furthermore, he had brought out the 3 great flowers. This person was indeed very powerful. "Elder Ming, did someone from your ancient Ming race really enter the Abandoned Land?" Shui Jing sucked in a breath of cold air and asked in shock. The Forsaken Lands had always been a legend. Even the 5 clan leaders had only heard of it, but had never actually been there. Furthermore, they knew that even Ming Jinyu had never been to the land of the Abandoned. Yes, Ming Jinyu nodded and admitted that someone from the ancient Ming race had entered the land of the Abandoned, and it was that person who had brought back the seeds of the 3 great flowers. Nietion and the 5 clan patriarchs were taken aback, their eyes trembling violently. Then they thought of a person at the same time, exclaiming in surprise, "The Underworld Emperor!" That's right, they were also sure that the person who had entered the land of the Abandoned was the king of the ancient Ming tribe, the Emperor of the Underworld. If there was someone who had the strength to enter the Forsaken Land and return unscathed, then that person would definitely be the Emperor of the Underworld. Ming Jinyu nodded again and said, "It was the Emperor of the Underworld who entered the Abandoned Land. He was also the one who brought back the seeds of the 3 great flowers." Nietion and the others nodded slightly, their faces filled with shock. The Emperor of the Underworld was indeed not an ordinary person. Activating the Julie Steel and entering the Forsaken Land were both earth-shattering events. These things happened to a single person, which was enough to show how terrifying this person was. At this moment, Nietion also understood why Xian Zongfeng had the blood-weeping sword infant. This was because the Crimson Sword infant was originally from the Abandoned Land, and Xian Zongfeng was from the Abandoned Land. "Elder Ming, so, as long as we enter the Abandoned Land, even if we can't find the profound hidden peak, we can still find the 9 demon fire fox, right?" At this time, Nietion suddenly thought of this and asked with blazing eyes. "Yes." Ming Jinyu nodded solemnly, but his expression was slightly solemn. "All right, then let's head to the Forsaken Land immediately." Nietion didn't pay too much attention to it. Instead, he was very excited. "Lord Saint Executor, this." The eyes of the 5 elven patriarchs sank, and their faces suddenly turned pale. They were extremely embarrassed. Nietian was now a saint executor of the 9 elven clans. How could he casually enter a dangerous place like the abandoned land? The current Nietian was a person related to the survival of the 9 elven clans. 5 patriarchs. Sakura is my friend. I must save him. Therefore, I must go to the land of the abandoned. Nietian knew what the 5 of them were thinking. He looked at the 5 of them and said with a firm gaze. The 5 patriarchs were stunned, and then they looked at Ming Jinyu. Ming Jinyu's eyes slightly sank, and he said, 5 patriarchs. Since Lord Saint Executor has already decided, of course we can't object. But don't worry, I will enter the abandoned land with Lord Saint Executor and ensure his safety. The 5 patriarchs' eyes trembled, and their expressions stiffened. They didn't expect Ming Jinyu to agree to Nietian's decision so easily. Wasn't Ming Jinyu the person who cared about Nietian the most? Why did he agree to go to the abandoned land this time? At this moment, Nietian's gaze also froze, and he was quite surprised by Ming Jinyu's attitude. He originally thought that Ming Jinyu would object, but he didn't expect the latter to support his decision. Ming Jinyu's attitude was a little strange. Lord Saint Executor, you just became a Saint Executor, and you want to leave the 9 demon domain? Moreover, you're in a dangerous place like the abandoned land. If the 9 elven clans find out about this, I'm afraid it will cause a commotion. Shui Jing stepped forward and said with an urgent expression. Nietian faintly smiled, and he said, That's easy. As long as the 5 patriarchs don't leak this Saint Executor's whereabouts, no one will know where I'm going. This matter can only be known by the few of us, and no one else can know. Not even the patriarchs of the 3 great demon clans can know. The 5 patriarchs' faces sank. They didn't expect Nietian to say this. Before the 5 patriarchs could say anything, Nietian said resolutely, 5 patriarchs, you can leave now. Remember, you can't tell anyone about what happened today. The 5 patriarchs' faces stiffened. How could such a serious matter be treated like child's play by Nietian? 5 patriarchs, please leave. At this moment, Ming Jinyu also spoke, and he actually asked the 5 of them to leave immediately. Shui Jing and the others looked at each other and only reacted after a few seconds. They all had helpless expressions. They knew that since things had reached this point, there was no turning back. They could only let Nietian go to the abandoned land. The 5 of them sighed and finally left. Elder Ming, thank you for supporting my decision. Nietian took a deep breath, and he said, Let's go now. Wait, we're still waiting for someone. Ming Jinyu stopped Nietian, but his expression was a little strange. Waiting for someone? Waiting for who? Nietian was stunned for a moment, and he asked, Mizuhara Kaori. Ming Jinyu said faintly, Mizuhara Kaori? He also wants to go to the abandoned land with us? Nietian was stunned again, and his face was full of doubt. He suddenly realized that Ming Jinyu seemed to have long prepared to go to the abandoned land, and he even informed Mizuhara Kaori. Could it be that Ming Jinyu knew everything in advance? At this time, Nietian finally felt that something was wrong. It was indeed very strange that Ming Jinyu agreed to his decision, and there must be something else. Elder Ming, you said that you have something to ask of me. What is it? Suddenly, Nietian remembered that when he first arrived, Ming Jinyu said that he needed his help with something, but he was too focused on saving Di Shirtian that he forgot. Now that he thought about it, he couldn't help but have a guess. The thing that Ming Jinyu needed his help with was to go to the abandoned land. Moreover, Ming Jinyu's expression was very solemn, as if he was worried about something. Lord Sage, the thing that I need your help with is to go to the abandoned land. Ming Jinyu looked at Nietian, and he knew that the latter had guessed something, so he didn't hide it anymore, and said in a deep voice, To be honest, the 9 demon region is facing a huge crisis. Chapter 21:18. Ming Jinyu looked at Nietian with a solemn expression. The 9 demon region is facing a great crisis. Nietian was stunned for a moment before his expression sank. At this moment, he finally understood why Ming Jinyu said, Heaven's will, when Shui Jing mentioned the Forsaken Land. It turned out that Ming Jinyu had already decided to go to the Forsaken Land. However, he didn't expect that Nie Tian would also want to go to the Forsaken Land to save someone. The matter that Nie Tian wanted Ming Jinyu's help and the matter that Ming Jinyu wanted Nie Tian's help pointed to the same place, the Forsaken Land. This was what Ming Jinyu meant by heaven's will. Elder Ming, what happened? Nie Tian became cold and asked with a flicker in his eyes. Seeing Ming Jinyu's reaction, it seemed that the danger that the Nine-Li demon region was facing was really great. Lord Saint, do you know what kind of place the Nine-Li demon region is? Ming Jinyu didn't answer directly and asked a question instead. Nie Tian shook his head. He was very anxious in his heart. The entire Nine-Li demon region is actually a space-time fragment of the sacred world. Ming Jinyu looked at Nie Tian and said solemnly, "What?" Nie Tian let out a strange cry and said in shock, "The Nine-Li demon region is also formed from a fragment of the sacred world?" The Forsaken Land was formed from countless space-time fragments of the sacred world. This was something that Nie Tian had just learned. He didn't expect that the Nine-Li demon region was actually formed from a fragment of the sacred world. Yes, Ming Jinyu nodded and said, "The Nine-Li demon region was created by a saint called the Nine-Li ancestor using a fragment of the sacred world." Elder Ming, how do you know? Nie Tian forced himself to calm down and asked in shock. This is recorded in the Nine-Li Remnant Scroll. Ming Jinyu nodded and said, "The Nine-Li ancestor left after creating the Nine-Li demon region. However, the Nine-Li demon region is not a stable world. The sacred world fragment itself is unstable. It needs something called space-time crystal to maintain its stability. The Nine-Li demon region has existed for millions of years. The current Jili demon territory is already in a very unstable state. When you entered the 7 Extinction Peak just now, you activated the power of the 7 Extinction Formation with a casual swing of your sword. The space tens of thousands of meters around you directly collapsed. This is the sign of space-time collapse." Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he recalled the scene from before. He didn't pay much attention to it at the time, but now that he thought about it, it was indeed a little strange. Although the power of the 7 Extremes formation was strong, it shouldn't be able to cause a large-scale space collapse. It seemed that the space-time of the Nine-Li demon realm was indeed unstable. Elder Ming, you mean that we're going to enter the Forsaken Land to search for the space-time crystal essence, right? Nie Tian immediately reacted and asked with blazing eyes. Just now, Ming Jinyu had mentioned that the space-time crystal essence could stabilize the sacred world fragment. Yes. Ming Jinyu nodded firmly and said, "The abandoned land is an extremely special place. It's constructed from countless fragments of the saint's world. Since the space there can remain stable, it means there's an extremely large amount of space-time crystals there. Furthermore, the Underworld Emperor said that the Nine-Li demon realm might face a crisis in the future. Only the space-time crystals in the Forsaken Land can save the Nine-Li demon realm. I believe that the Underworld Emperor sensed that the space-time of the Nine-Li demon realm had become unstable at that time." "I see." Nie Tian nodded and asked, "Elder Ming, how long does he think the Nine-Li demon realm can exist?" "I don't know." Ming Jinyu shook his head and sighed, "Perhaps a day, perhaps a year, or perhaps 10,000 years. The fragments of the saint's world can exist for a very long time. The difference between a day and 10,000 years really isn't that great." Nie Tian was stunned. He finally understood why Ming Jinyu was in such a hurry to enter the Forsaken Land. The entire Nine-Li demon realm was facing an unprecedented crisis. The space-time could collapse at any time. If this really happened, all the members of the 9 clans would die. "Elder Ming, since you already knew that the space-time of the Nine-Li demon realm was in danger, why did you wait until now to enter the Forsaken Land?" Nie Tian couldn't help but ask. "I'm waiting for you." Ming Jinyu looked at Nie Tian with a burning gaze and said, "Only you can save the Jili demon realm from its crisis." "What do you mean?" Nie Tian was confused. Before Ming Jinyu, Nie Tian's strength could only be described as trash. Even Nie Tian was unable to save the Jili demonic region. So how was he, a laid-over god, supposed to save it? Lord Sage Duel, if you want to save the Geely demon domain, you can only use the space-time crystal essence. Ming Jinyu's eyes were fixed on Nye Tian as he said, "The Emperor of the Underworld once entered the Forsaken Land. He told me that the space-time crystal exists in a very special place, and those places can only be entered by those with extraordinary talent. Even the Underworld Emperor couldn't enter those places back then. Otherwise, he would have brought the space-time crystal essence back then." Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and he immediately understood. The space-time crystal essences were most likely in some forbidden area or ruins. There were special restrictions there, and only those with high enough aptitude could enter. Even the Emperor of the Underworld couldn't enter those places back then. The reason why Ming Jinyu didn't go to the Forsaken Land was because he was waiting for an extremely talented person. Now, he had finally found Nye Tian. Nye Tian also understood why Ming Jinyu was willing to give up his position as a sacred duelist to save his life. Ming Jinyu was certain that only Nye Tian could enter the Forsaken Land, retrieve the space-time crystal essences, and save the Geely demon realm. Nye Tian was extremely curious. Just what kind of place was it that even someone like the Emperor of the Underworld couldn't enter? "Elder Ming, don't worry. I'll definitely obtain the space-time crystal essences." Nye Tian smiled faintly after learning everything. His face was filled with great confidence. Nye Tian was extremely happy to be able to save the Geely demon realm. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to rest easy as a sacred duelist. "Master!" At this moment, Mizuhara Kaori's figure appeared. Seeing that Nye Tian was also present, she immediately bowed deeply and said with a respectful expression, "Mizuhara Kaori greets Lord Sacred Duelist." "There's no need to be so polite." Nye Tian laughed. Mizuhara Kaori's solemnity made him feel a little embarrassed. When he saw Mizuhara Kaori again, Nye Tian felt that she was much more mature. At the very least, the arrogance in her eyes was much more restrained. Ming Jinyu smiled faintly and did not explain anything to Mizuhara Kaori. Instead, he said to Nye Tian, "Lord Sacred Duelist, Mizuhara Kaori is here. Let's go." Nye Tian nodded slightly. Of course, he understood why Ming Jinyu brought Mizuhara Kaori. It was because he wanted the latter to be his substitute. Ming Jinyu wasn't 100% sure that Nye Tian could enter the Forsaken Land where the space-time crystal essences were hidden. Moreover, Mizuhara Kaori's talent wasn't bad either. He brought her along just in case. Chapter 2119. Lord Holy Duelist. The space-time passage to the Forsaken Land is at the peak of Heaven's Cliffs, Ming Jinyu said as he walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, Nye Tian raised his head and looked at the peak of Heaven's Cliffs. The sky was shrouded in clouds, and he couldn't see the end of it. Ming Jinyu said that the peak of Heaven's Cliffs was hundreds of thousands of meters high, and there was an extremely violent ninth heaven astral wind at the peak that ordinary people couldn't withstand. "Lord Holy Duelist, the two of you must follow me closely," Ming Jinyu said nervously as his gaze swept across Nye Tian and Mizuhara Kaori. Nye Tian and Mizuhara Kaori nodded slightly. They were also nervous, especially Mizuhara Kaori, whose forehead was covered in beads of sweat. She heard Ming Jinyu say that they were going to the Forsaken Land, which made her excited and worried at the same time. She had heard of the Forsaken Land, but she had always thought that it was just a legend. She didn't expect it to actually exist. Ming Jinyu nodded solemnly. His body trembled slightly, and a terrifying force surged from his body, enveloping Nye Tian and Mizuhara Kaori. Then he stomped his feet and soared into the sky, flying toward the peak of Heaven's Cliffs. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian and the other two were already high up in the sky. The surrounding astral wind was fierce, and it was like a sharp blade was blowing at them. Fortunately, they had Ming Jinyu's protection. Otherwise, Nye Tian and Mizuhara Kaori wouldn't have been able to withstand the terrifying astral wind. Lord Holy Duelist, the altar in front is the passage to the Forsaken Land. After a while, Ming Jinyu slowed down and pointed at an ancient altar diagonally above them. Nietian looked over and saw an ancient and majestic altar floating in mid-air at the peak of heaven's cliffs. The altar wasn't big, but it constantly emitted an ancient and solemn aura. Nietian noticed that in the center of the altar was a space-time vortex, which should be the space-time passage to the Forsaken Land. This altar is called the Ninely Altar. It was created by the creator of the Ninely Demon Domain, the Ninely Ancestor, before he left. Ming Jinyu's figure froze. He looked at the altar with reverence and said, perhaps the Ninely Ancestor already knew that the Ninely Demon Realm was unstable, so he left behind this Ninely altar that leads to the Abandoned Land. Elder Ming, what should we do now? Directly into the altar? Nietian felt the fierce astral winds around him as he looked at the Julie altar with a burning gaze and asked in a somewhat puzzled manner. He could sense that the space-time vortex at the center of the altar was extremely powerful. With his current strength, his martial body would be crushed by the space-time pressure if he were to approach it. Of course we can't enter directly. Ming Jinyu laughed and said, the pressure of the vortex is very strong. Even I can't withstand it. Then what should we do? Nietian asked anxiously. Ming Jinyu let out a calm smile without saying a word. He took a step forward and performed a strange hand seal, causing a stream of energy to surge into the vortex at the center of the altar. Boom! Immediately after, the altar's vortex reacted to the impact. A ray of light surged out and slowly formed a space-time tunnel. Nietian and Mizuhara Kaori were both shocked by the scene before them. They looked at each other and were speechless for a long time. Lord Saint Duelist, this space-time tunnel won't exist for long. You must follow me closely. Ming Jinyu took a deep breath and stepped into the space-time tunnel. Nietian and Mizuhara Kaori reacted and hurriedly followed him. Three figures walked into the space-time vortex step by step. When they entered the center of the space-time vortex, Nietian and Mizuhara Kaori instantly felt the terrifying space-time pressure and screamed at the same time. In the next moment, both of them fainted. When he opened his eyes again, what Nietian saw was a completely unfamiliar environment. He was currently in a mountain range, surrounded by huge trees and continuous mountain peaks. Above him was the azure sky and white clouds. Everything seemed no different from a world he had been in before. That said, Nietian knew that he was in the fabled land of the Forsaken. You're awake, Lord Saint Duelist, Ming Jinyu said, looking deeply concerned at Nietian. What happened just now, Elder Ming? Nietian asked, rising to his feet. All he could remember was entering the space-time vortex and the terrifying space-time pressure. He couldn't remember anything after that. Lord Saint Duelist, your martial bodies and Mizuhara Kaori's are too weak, so the space-time pressure caused you to lose consciousness. Ming Jinyu looked off to the side, where Mizuhara Kaori was still sleeping. He found it strange that Nietian had woken up before Mizuhara Kaori, which meant that Nietian's martial body wasn't any weaker than Mizuhara Kaori's. In fact, it was even stronger. But right now, Nietian was only a late Lord God, while Mizuhara Kaori was a late Paramount God. The two of them were a whole realm apart, but Nietian's martial body was stronger than Mizuhara Kaori's, which showed how terrifying it was. Ming Jinyu wondered how strong Nietian's martial body would be when he reached the peak of the Paramount God realm. What happened, Master? Mizuhara Kaori woke up as well, as if she had just had a nightmare. She sat up abruptly, her forehead drenched in sweat. You're awake, Mizuhara Kaori. Ming Jinyu walked over and checked Mizuhara Kaori's condition. After making sure she was fine, he relaxed and said, Everything's fine now. We're in the land of the Forsaken. So this is the land of the Forsaken? Mizuhara Kaori stood up and looked around, her eyes filled with confusion. It seems like there's no difference between this place and the Jili territory. Yeah. Ming Jinyu nodded slightly and said, the structure of a world at any level is more or less the same. Plain worlds, territories, and even the Holy Realm don't look much different from each other on the surface. The biggest difference between these three worlds is the stability of time and space, and the composition of the world's power. Plain worlds are filled with the power of heaven and earth. territories are filled with the power of God, and the Holy Realm is filled with the power of Holy. The land of the Forsaken we're in now is between the territory and the Holy Realm, but it's more inclined towards the territory. Therefore, the power here is the power of God, and only some special areas have the power of Holy. I see. Niet Tian and Mizuhara Kori nodded slightly, agreeing with Ming Jinyu's explanation. They didn't expect that Ming Jinyu, who had never been to the land of the Forsaken, would know so much about it. Ming Jinyu smiled faintly. In fact, he knew so much because he had a notebook left behind by the Emperor of the Netherworld. The Emperor of the Netherworld had been to the land of the Forsaken, so he had recorded many things about the land of the Forsaken. Ming Jinyu wanted to say something else, but at that moment, something strange happened. Chapter 2120. Get out of the way. Ming Jinyu was the first to react. He immediately unleashed his power and wrapped Niet Tian and Mizuhara Kaori up. Then, the three of them retreated several thousand meters away. Whoosh! In the next instant, a figure flew past them like an arrow. His speed was extremely fast. Wherever he passed, a long ravine that was dozens of meters wide and several meters deep appeared on the ground. All the trees within 100 meters of him were pulverized. What speed! Seeing the figure disappear in an instant, Niet Tian's face sank. He was quite shocked. He had seen many movement techniques of experts. However, none of them were as fast as that person. That person was truly like a flash of lightning. Niet Tian didn't even manage to see his face clearly. That person's speed is unimaginable. Mizuhara Kaori was also stunned. Ming Jinyu frowned and said, "Could that person be someone from a Swiftwind clan?" Swiftwind clan? Both Niet Tian and Mizuhara Kaori were startled upon hearing Ming Jinyu's words. Ming Jinyu did not hide anything. He said, "Actually, I have a personal note left behind by Lord Emperor of the Underworld. There is a special clan recorded in it. The people of that clan are all wind-attributed cultivators. Furthermore, they are born with the swift wind bloodline. When the power of their bloodline is activated, their speed will reach its pinnacle and surpass cultivators of the same level." That person's speed was extremely fast. Even with my current strength, it would be difficult for me to catch up to him. Thus, I suspect that he might be someone from the Swift Wind clan recorded in the Underworld Emperor's personal note. Niet Tian and Mizuhara Kaori's eyes trembled in astonishment. No wonder Ming Jinyu knew so much about the abandoned land. It turned out that he had the Underworld Emperor's personal note. Niet Tian was extremely curious. Exactly what sort of place was the abandoned land? Why would there be so many strange clans? According to Shui Jing and the others, the ancient era's elves' yin-yang lineage was also located in the abandoned land. It must be said that the speed of that person was truly astonishing. Even Ming Jinyu felt ashamed of his own inferiority. One must know that Ming Jinyu was a half-saint. Catch that kid. Don't let him escape. At this moment, a chaotic sound came from afar. Then, dozens of figures appeared and ran forward. Their speed was fast, but compared to the previous person, it was like the difference between a tortoise and a rabbit. It was obvious that these people were trying to catch that person. However, they were too slow and had long since been shaken off by that person. Niet Tian looked at the dozens of figures in the distance. His divine sense spread out, and he couldn't help but frown, surprise in his eyes. They were all paramount gods, most of them early paramount gods with a few mid-paramount gods. This kind of strength was not too strong. At least, it was not a threat to the current Niet Tian. However, this also surprised Niet Tian, because he could see that these people should be small fries. The fact that a bunch of small fries were actually paramount gods went to show just how strong the people in the abandoned land were. Niet Tian and the others watched from afar without saying a word, quietly watching everyone leave. Venerable Saint Duelist, we must be very cautious in the abandoned land. We must not attract unnecessary trouble. After making sure that there was no one around, Ming Jinyu said, "The martial artists in the abandoned land are generally stronger than the 9 demon realm and the 9 realms. Even I have to be very careful when I come to the Forsaken land. Elder Ming, do you know how strong the peak experts in the abandoned land are?" Are there any sages here? Tian was stunned for a moment, but then he asked with a burning gaze. He already knew that Ming Jinyu was a half-saint. Since even he had to be careful, it was obvious how dangerous the abandoned land was. Tian was very curious about whether there were any sages in this world that was pieced together from the fragments of the sacred world. There shouldn't be any sages. Ming Jinyu shook his head. But according to the notes of the Netherworld Emperor, the peak experts in the abandoned land should be existences infinitely close to sages. Those people all have the strength to become sages, but for some reason, they have never been able to reach the sage realm. And yet Tian's gaze trembled, and a burning desire flashed through his eyes. The peak experts in the abandoned land were infinitely close to sages. However, it was a pity that there were no true sages in the abandoned land. It seemed that the abandoned land was still incomparable to the sacred world. Tian guessed that Ming Jinyu's strength was definitely considered an expert in the abandoned land, but he was definitely not the peak expert. Otherwise, there was no need for Ming Jinyu to be so careful. Venerable Saint Duelist, for the sake of convenience, from now on, I will no longer call you Saint Duelist. I will call you by your name. Ming Jinyu suddenly thought of this and said in a deep voice. Tian nodded. He naturally understood Ming Jinyu's meaning, so he smiled and turned his gaze to Mizuhara Kaori. Mizuhara Kaori, you can call me by my name as well. The title of Saint Duelist was too eye-catching, and it gave off a very arrogant feeling. Moreover, Tian was so young. If Ming Jinyu continued to call him Venerable Saint Duelist, it would make outsiders feel uncomfortable and might cause unnecessary trouble. In fact, Tian didn't care about this at all. Whether it was Venerable Saint Duelist or the name Tian, it was just a title, and there wasn't much difference. Ming Jinyu nodded his head as he took out a map and said, I've just checked. We're currently in the Dark Night mountain range, and there's a city a few hundred li away from the mountain range called the Dark Night City. Let's go to the Dark Night City first. Perhaps we can find some information about the 9-demon fire fox there. The map in Ming Jinyu's hand was the entire map of the abandoned land, and it was naturally left behind by the Emperor of the Underworld. Because Sakura's life was in danger, the most important thing for Tian's group was to find the 9-demon fire fox. Okay, Tian agreed and prepared to leave. The three of them did not hesitate and left the Dark Night Mountains. After a while, the three of them arrived at the outskirts of the mountains. Suddenly, they heard the howling of a pig being slaughtered in the distance. Save me, don't kill me. The howling was very urgent and sharp. Apart from making one's heart wrench, there was an inexplicable sense of joy in it. This voice, Tian frowned. Suddenly, his eyes trembled, and he said in surprise, It's the person from the swift wind race from before. Just now, a person flew past Tian at an extremely fast speed. He didn't see the person's face clearly, but he remembered the person's voice. Ming Jinyu analyzed that this person was most likely from the swift wind race. And now, the howling that Tian's group heard was clearly from this person from the swift wind race. And that person was caught? Ming Jinyu also heard it and couldn't help but be stunned. Earlier, they had seen dozens of martial artists chasing after the person from the swift wind race. Chapter 21:21. Tian, let's go around them and leave on the other side. Although Ming Jinyu was confused, he didn't want to meddle in other people's business, so he decided to leave from the other side. Tian hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he agreed with Ming Jinyu's decision and went around the people in front. Right now, saving Dishur Tian was the most important thing, so Tian didn't have time to waste. Otherwise, with his personality, he would definitely go over to see what was going on. Tian and the other two carefully retreated, wanting to go around the people in front of them. But right at this moment, Tian seemed to have discovered something, and his body froze as he exclaimed in a low voice, Wait! Tian, what's wrong? Ming Jinyu was startled by Tian and asked nervously, Elder Ming, can you sense carefully, is there a very strange aura around us? Tian had a strange expression on his face, and he spread out his divine sense to carefully sense the aura around him. He suddenly felt that there seemed to be a very familiar aura around him. Even this aura made the sword intent in his body slightly restless. This is... Ming Jinyu was stunned at first. Then he carefully sensed it, and then his face stiffened, unable to say anything else. Elder Ming, what did you discover? Nie Tian saw Ming Jinyu's reaction, and his eyes trembled as he asked anxiously. Ming Jinyu didn't speak, but waved his hand to signal Nie Tian to be quiet, and then his figure moved lightly, flashing forward. Nie Tian and Mizuhara Kori didn't know what Ming Jinyu had discovered, so they didn't dare to act rashly and could only watch nervously from the side. At this time, Ming Jinyu turned back. There was an extra thing in his palm. When he saw that thing, Nie Tian's pupils shrank and his expression stiffened. He never thought that the thing in Ming Jinyu's hand was actually the blood-weeping sword infant. Nie Tian came to a sudden realization and almost exclaimed, "The blood-weeping sword nascent soul." Ming Jinyu nodded his head and said in a low voice, "I haven't seen the blood-sobbing sword soul for hundreds of thousands of years, and I almost forgot its aura. If it wasn't for your reminder, I might have missed this blood-sobbing sword soul." Nie Tian nodded slightly and calmed down a little. Then, he asked with a frown, "Elder Ming, why is there a blood-tears sword infant here?" "I don't know either." Ming Jinyu shook his head cautiously and said, "Nie Tian, let's leave this place first. It won't be good if we're discovered by the people ahead." Nie Tian frowned. He had no intention of leaving. Instead, he said, "Elder Ming, I feel that something isn't right. Perhaps this blood-sobbing sword infant is related to those people before us." "Nie Tian, you mean?" Ming Jinyu's face stiffened. He had already guessed Nie Tian's intention. "Since those people are in front of us, we might as well go and take a look." Nie Tian nodded slightly and said with a determined look, "All right." Ming Jinyu hesitated for a while, but still agreed with Nie Tian's decision. Since they had made the decision, the three of them stopped being cautious and walked forward openly. "Who's there? Show yourself." When they were about 500 to 600 meters away from the people in front of them, the people in front of them had already sensed their presence and roared furiously. Nie Tian and the others didn't hide and walked out directly. In front of them were 40 to 50 martial artists in black. Each of them had a cold look and were emitting a dark, murderous aura. Next to these martial artists in black, there was a small black iron cage. In the cage was a short martial artist. The martial artist in the cage was short and had a pale complexion. He looked like a 10-year-old child who had not developed well. His face was also as skinny as a stick. Looking closely, he looked 70% like a human and 30% like a monkey. The short martial artist also looked at Nie Tian and the others. As if he had discovered something, he suddenly shrieked and acted extremely surprised. When Nie Tian heard the voice, he immediately confirmed that it was the person from the Swiftwind clan who had flashed past him earlier. He had never thought that the person from the Swiftwind clan would have such a strange appearance. Did all the people of the Swiftwind clan look like this? Looking at the situation, the person from the Swiftwind clan seemed to have fallen into a trap, which was why he had been captured. Nie Tian specially sensed the person's strength. He was actually only a late over-god, which was far beyond his expectations. Originally, he had thought that the person should be an over-god at the very least given how fast he was. As it seemed now, he had underestimated the Swiftwind bloodline of the Swiftwind clan. The weaker the Swiftwind clan member was, the more powerful the bloodline was. "Who are you?" At this moment, one of the black-clothed martial artists stepped forward and looked at Nie Tian and the others coldly. "We're just passing by, but I have some questions I want to ask you." Nie Tian smiled faintly as he stared at the black-clothed martial artist with a sunken gaze. "Since you have nothing to do with this matter, piss off." However, the black-clothed martial artist clearly had no intention of answering the question. Instead, he bellowed out scornfully, "Are you telling me to piss off?" Nie Tianling sneered. "Originally, I just wanted to ask you a few questions calmly, but it looks like that's not going to happen." "Damn, brat, you're looking to die." The black-clothed martial artist could sense the disdain in Nie Tian's voice, so he was directly enraged. With a single movement, he threw a punch. Immediately, A violent presence erupted as a fist slammed towards Nietian. You're the one who's looking to die. Nietian did not move from his spot. A voice rang out behind him, and a powerful force appeared, directly shattering the black-clothed martial artist's fist and forcing him to retreat. The person who had attacked was none other than Mizuhara Kaori. With his strength, he could have instantly killed the black-clothed martial artist, but he did not do so. The black-clothed martial artist was forced back by Mizuhara Kaori's attack. His companions were stunned and immediately revealed expressions of horror. None of them dared to step forward. Who are you? The black-clothed martial artist steadied himself and looked at Nietian and Mizuhara Kaori in shock. He said, don't you know that we're from the Dark Moon Divine Church? Do you want to become enemies with the Dark Moon Divine Church? With just one exchange, the black-clothed martial artist knew that he was no match for Mizuhara Kaori. It was not an exaggeration to say that Mizuhara Kaori alone could easily kill all of them. Hence, he had used the power behind him, the Dark Moon Divine Church, to threaten Nietian and the others. Nietian smiled faintly and ignored the other party's threat. Instead, he said in a deep voice, let me ask you, can I ask my questions now? The black-clothed martial artist looked at Nietian and could feel the murderous intent in the latter's eyes. He could not help but gulp, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. In a trembling voice, he said, yes, you can. You should have said so earlier. The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. He said directly, earlier, we found a blood-weeping sword infant in the surroundings. Is it yours? Hearing Nietian mention the blood-weeping sword infant, the black-clothed martial artist's eyes trembled and his expression stiffened.